Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. I'm Penelope, 34. The forest at Gifford Pinchot National Forest smelled like fresh paint. That's what I remember most clearly from the moment we pulled our borrowed RV into the clearing off Forest Road 90. About 15 miles southeast of Mount St. Helens. The scent hit me as soon as I stepped out onto the packed dirt. Sharp, chemical, utterly wrong for a place that should have smelled like pine sap and moss and autumn decay. My husband, Derek, wrinkled his nose. "Someone dumping chemicals out here?" he asked, scanning the tree line. "Maybe trail markers," I offered, though I didn't believe it. The smell was too pervasive, too intentional, like someone had taken a brush to every surface in a 10-acre radius. We'd come to Gifford Pinchot for our 10th anniversary, a last-minute trip cobbled together after our original plans to Maui fell through when Derek's contracting business hit a rough patch. His brother Larry had offered us his RV, a 1987 Winnebago Chieftain that rattled and groaned but still ran, and we'd jumped at the chance to get away from Seattle's gray drizzle for a long weekend. Just the two of us, some hiking, some quiet. We'd been arguing a lot lately, the kind of low-grade bickering that comes from too much proximity and not enough money, and I'd hoped the forest would give us room to breathe. The clearing was perfect in an eerie sort of way. No other campers, no facilities, just a rough circle of flattened earth surrounded by Douglas firs so tall they seemed to bend the sky. A creek burbled somewhere to the west, and the October light filtered through the canopy in dusty shafts. Everything looked normal. Everything except that smell. "It's strong," Derek said, pulling our gear from the RV's storage compartments. Like someone just finished painting a house. I walked to the edge of the clearing where the forest proper began. The smell intensified there, and when I ran my hand along the bark of the nearest fir, my fingers came away tacky. Not wet exactly, but sticky, like the tree was still drying. I brought my hand to my nose and inhaled. Definitely paint, or something very close to it. Latex, maybe. The kind of smell that gives you a headache if you breathe it too long. "Derek, come look at this." He joined me and I showed him the residue on my fingers. He touched the tree himself, then examined the bark more closely. In the fading afternoon light, the texture looked almost too perfect, like it had been applied rather than grown. "That's weird as hell," he muttered. "Should we find another spot?" He shook his head. "We drove 3 hours to get here. It's probably just some forestry thing. They mark trees for cutting, right? Maybe this is some new method." I wanted to argue, but I was tired and my back hurt from the drive, and the idea of navigating those narrow forest roads in the dark didn't appeal to me. So I let it go. We set up camp, or rather, we leveled the RV and extended the awning, since Larry's rig was fully self-contained. By the time we had the propane connected and the interior lights working, dusk was settling over the clearing like a gray wool blanket. Derek grilled burgers on the portable camp stove while I prepped a salad inside. Through the RV's windows, I watched the forest darken, and that paint smell seemed to intensify with the falling temperature, as if the cold were activating something in the air. When I mentioned it to Derek, he just shrugged. "You're overthinking it, Pen. We're in the woods. Weird smells happen." But it wasn't just the smell anymore. As we ate dinner at the fold-out table, I became aware of how quiet it was outside. No bird calls, no rustling of small animals, no insect sounds. Just the creek's steady murmur and the occasional groan of the RV settling. The silence felt dense, almost solid, like something pressing against the thin aluminum walls. "No wildlife," I said. "It's October. Things are bedding down for winter. There should still be something. Owls, coyotes." Derek set down his burger and looked at me with that expression he got when he thought I was spiraling into anxiety. "Babe, you've been stressed. That's why we're here. Try to relax, okay?" I bit back my response and focused on my food, but the silence bothered me. I'd grown up camping with my family in the Cascades, and I'd never experienced quiet like this. Even in deep winter, there was always something moving, something alive. This felt evacuated, abandoned. After dinner, we tried to start a fire in the metal ring someone had left in the clearing's center, but the wood wouldn't catch. Derek used half a bottle of lighter fluid and burned through a whole box of matches, but the flames kept sputtering out after a few seconds as if something were smothering them. Finally, he gave up, cursing under his breath. Wood must be too damp, he said, though we both knew that wasn't true. The logs were bone-dry, splitting easily under his hatchet. We retreated to the RV as full darkness fell. Inside, with the propane heater running and the curtains drawn, things felt almost normal. We played cards for a while, drank the bottle of wine we'd brought, and by 10 o'clock we were ready for bed. The RV's queen mattress was lumpy and smelled like mildew, but I was exhausted enough not to care. I woke sometime after midnight to Derek's hand on my shoulder. "Pen, wake up." His voice was tight, controlled in that way that meant he was trying not to panic. I sat up, instantly alert, my heart already racing. "What's wrong?" "Listen." I held my breath and listened. At first I heard nothing but the propane heater's soft hiss. Then I heard it, a sound like brushes on canvas, rhythmic and wet, coming from outside. Swish, swish, swish. It circled the RV slowly, pausing at each window. "What the hell is that?" I whispered. Derek was already out of bed, pulling on his jeans. He grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from the counter and moved toward the door. "Don't go out there," I said, my throat tight. "Something's messing with the RV. Could be a bear." "That doesn't sound like a bear." He ignored me and opened the door, flashlight raised. The beam cut into the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and that damn paint smell, even stronger now, thick enough to taste. Derek stepped down onto the dirt, swinging the light in slow arcs. I crowded behind him in the doorway, my bare feet cold on the metal step. The brushing sound had stopped. The forest was absolutely still, that same suffocating silence from earlier. Derek's flashlight picked out the RV's exterior, and I saw what had made the sound. Fresh paint covered the vehicle's side, cream-colored, still wet, applied in long vertical strokes that dripped slowly toward the ground. The whole surface had been coated, obliterating the Winnebago's original tan and brown stripes. "Jesus Christ," Derek breathed. He approached the paint, reached out to touch it, then thought better of it. The smell was overwhelming now, making my eyes water. I scanned the clearing, looking for whoever had done this, but saw nothing. No footprints in the dirt, no signs of another presence. "Who the fuck would do this?" Derek's voice was rising. "Some kind of prank? Are we being filmed?" "Derek, get back inside." "No, this is bullshit." "Hey," he shouted into the trees. "Very funny. You got us. You can come out now?" Nothing answered. The silence seemed to deepen, to congeal around his words and swallow them. I felt my skin prickling, every instinct screaming that we needed to leave. Now, immediately. "Derek, please, let's just go." He turned back to me, and in the flashlight's backwash I saw his face was pale, his eyes too wide. Yeah, okay, let's pack up and get out of here." We retreated into the RV and locked the door, a useless gesture that nonetheless made me feel marginally safer. Derek turned the key in the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then nothing. He tried again. Click, click, click. Dead. No. He kept cranking the key, pumping the gas pedal, but the Winnebago refused to start. Finally, he slammed his palm against the steering wheel. The battery was fine. I checked it before we left. Could it be the paint? Maybe it got into the engine somehow? That doesn't make any sense. But nothing made sense. I grabbed my phone from the bedside cubby, hoping for cell service, but the screen showed no bars. We were too far from the main road, too deep in the forest's dead zones. "We hike out," I said. "It's only a few miles to the highway. In the dark? Through the woods? You have a better idea?" He didn't. We dressed quickly, jeans, hiking boots, fleeces, and stuffed essentials into our day packs. Water bottles, first aid kit, the flashlight, my dead phone in case we hit a service area. Derek grabbed a hunting knife from his gear bag and clipped it to his belt. The sight of it made me feel slightly better and significantly worse at the same time. Before we left, I made the mistake of looking out the RV's rear window. The trees were wrong. I couldn't articulate exactly how, but they were different from when we'd arrived. The bark was too smooth, too uniform. The branches hung at slightly incorrect angles. The needles seemed painted on rather than grown, each cluster identical to the last. Even in the limited light, I could see that the forest had been transformed into something that resembled itself, but wasn't quite right, like a stage set or a child's drawing. "Derek," I said quietly, "look at the trees." He came to stand beside me and stared out into the darkness. For a long moment, he said nothing. "It's just the dark," he finally said. "Things look weird at night." But his voice shook, and when we left the RV, he moved close to me, the flashlight beam jerking nervously across the clearing as we headed for the dirt road. We'd walked maybe 20 yards when I realized the road was gone. The twin ruts that had brought us here, clear and obvious in daylight, had simply vanished. Where they should have been, unbroken forest stood, trees packed so tightly together that there was no path between them, no gap wide enough for even a person to squeeze through. I turned in a slow circle, disoriented, looking for the road in other directions, but found only trees. "This isn't possible," Derek said. He walked to where the road should have been and shone his light on the nearest trunk. Fresh paint glistened there, the same cream color that now covered our RV. He touched it, and his hand came away wet. "Someone's fucking with us. This is some kind of elaborate prank." "How? How would someone paint an entire forest in a few hours? How would they hide a road?" He had no answer. We stood there in the middle of the clearing, which suddenly seemed much smaller than before, the tree line creeping closer, and I felt reality bending around us, becoming plastic and unreliable. "The creek," I said. "We follow the creek downstream. It has to lead somewhere, to the river, maybe, or a road crossing." It was our only option. Derek nodded, and we set off toward the sound of running water, moving as quickly as we dared through the strange painted forest. The flashlight beam showed us more of the same wrongness: bark too perfect, branches too symmetrical. The understory vegetation arranged in patterns no forest would naturally grow. Ferns spiraled in neat rows. Fallen logs lay parallel, evenly spaced. Everything was too deliberate, too orderly. The paint smell intensified as we walked, until I could feel it coating the inside of my nose and throat. My head ached, a pressure building behind my eyes. Beside me, Derek coughed wetly, trying to clear his lungs. We reached the creek after 10 minutes of stumbling through the false forest. The water looked normal, clear and quick over smooth stones, but when Derek shone his light on it, I saw paint swirling in the current, cream-colored ribbons mixing with the water. The sight made my stomach lurch. "Don't drink it," I said unnecessarily. We followed the creek bank, moving as fast as the terrain allowed. The forest pressed close on both sides, and I had the growing sensation that it was watching us, that the trees themselves were aware of our presence and tracking our movement. Once I glanced back and could have sworn the path we'd just walked had vanished, sealed over with new growth. "Derek, I think—" "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't say it. Just keep moving." But I had to say it. "I think the forest is repainting itself. I think we're inside something that's still wet, still being made." He stopped walking and looked at me, his face haggard in the flashlight's glow. "That's insane." "Is it? Look around. Everything's wrong. Everything's being changed." "Then what do we do?" I didn't know. We stood there on the creek bank while that impossible silence pressed down on us and the paint smell grew thicker, and I felt my grip on rational thought starting to slip. This couldn't be happening. Forests didn't repaint themselves. Reality didn't work this way, but reality had stopped working the moment we entered this clearing. Derek's flashlight flickered. The beam dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. "Shit, batteries are dying. You didn't bring spares? They're in the RV." Of course they were. I wanted to scream at him, but it wouldn't help. Instead, I pulled out my phone and activated its flashlight. Weak and bluish, but better than nothing. We continued along the creek, moving more slowly now, conserving battery life. The trees began to change. At first I thought it was just the dying light playing tricks. But no, The trunks were actually shifting, their painted surfaces rippling like water. I watched as bark patterns rearranged themselves, as branches crept across the sky, as the entire forest restructured in small, subtle ways, like watching a painting being corrected in real time by an invisible hand. "It's not done," I whispered. "We're inside something that's not finished yet." Derek grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" I listened. Beneath the creek's burble I heard something else. A rhythmic sound, wet and familiar. Swish, swish, swish. The same sound we'd heard circling the RV, but now it was all around us, coming from every direction at once. The sound of brushes on canvas, painting and repainting the world. "Run," Derek said. We ran, crashing through the undergrowth, following the creek as it twisted through the transforming forest. My phone's light bounced wildly, showing me nightmare glimpses of the changes. Trees growing faces, the ground becoming flat and artificial, shadows that moved independently of their sources. Derek's flashlight died completely, and we had only my phone's weak glow to guide us. The creek widened, became a stream, then a small river. We were making progress, had to be, but the forest showed no signs of thinning. If anything, it grew denser, more elaborate, more impossible. I saw flowers that couldn't exist in October blooming in perfect rows. I saw rocks stacked in deliberate cairns, then watched them collapse and restack themselves in different configurations. I saw my own face reflected in tree bark, painted in exquisite detail. Derek stumbled and went down hard, his knee cracking against a stone. He cursed, clutching his leg, and I helped him up. Blood seeped through his jeans. "I'm okay," he gasped. "Keep going." But he was limping badly now, each step an effort. I put his arm around my shoulders and we staggered forward together, my phone's battery dropping to 15%, then 10. The brushing sounds grew louder, more insistent, and I realized they were forming patterns. Not random strokes, but deliberate marks, like letters being written in a language I couldn't read. My phone died. Darkness swallowed us, so complete and absolute that I couldn't see Derek even pressed against my side. The paint smell was suffocating now, filling my lungs with each breath, and I felt something fundamental inside me starting to change, as if my own tissues were being rewritten, rearranged, improved upon by whatever vast intelligence was remaking this forest. "Pen?" Derek's voice came from the darkness, but it sounded strange, flatter, less textured. "Pen, I feel weird." "Me too. Just hold on. Just—" Light bloomed around us, but not natural light. This was cold and even, coming from everywhere and nowhere, like we'd stepped onto a stage. And I could see Derek now, and I wished immediately that I couldn't. His skin had taken on that too-smooth quality I'd noticed in the tree bark. His features looked painted on, precise but somehow artificial. When he moved, he left faint after-images, like a figure in a still-drying canvas. He looked at his hands and made a sound that might have been a scream, or might have been something else entirely. "What's happening to me?" I looked down at myself and saw the same changes. Skin that seemed applied rather than grown, fingers that didn't quite connect to my hands in the right way. I was being absorbed into the painting, becoming part of whatever this forest was becoming. "We have to get out," I said, though I no longer knew what "out" meant, or if it even existed anymore. We stumbled forward through the sourceless light, following the river that might have been paint or water or something in between. The brushing sounds crescendoed around us, and I understood suddenly that we were hearing the artist at work, that something vast and incomprehensible was using this forest as its canvas, and we were simply figures in its composition. Small, unimportant, being refined and corrected with each passing moment. The river led us to a clearing, and in the clearing stood our RV. It looked perfect now, the paint job complete, gleaming white in the strange light. All signs of its age and wear had been erased. It sat in the center of a scene that resembled our original campsite but was somehow more idealized, more composed, more right than reality ever managed to be. "No," Derek whispered. "No, we walked miles. We couldn't have come in a circle. But we had, or the forest had bent around us, or space meant nothing in this place." I approached the RV with Derek limping beside me, and when I opened the door, I saw that the interior had been transformed too. Everything was clean, organized, rendered in perfect detail. Our belongings sat exactly where they should, but better, cleaner, more themselves than before. "Maybe if we sleep," Derek said, and his voice had that flat quality again, like he was reading lines. "Maybe when we wake up, things will be normal." I knew that wasn't true. Nothing would ever be normal again. But I was so tired, so saturated with paint fumes and terror, that the idea of lying down seemed like the only option. We climbed into the RV and closed the door. The bed was more comfortable than before. The sheets were crisp, the pillows perfectly fluffed. I lay down next to Derek and felt the painted version of myself settling into the painted bed in the painted RV. And some distant part of my mind that was still Penelope, still the real Penelope, screamed and couldn't make a sound. I closed my eyes and heard the brushing continue, softer now, more careful, detail work, refinements. When I opened my eyes again, it was dawn, and the light streaming through the RV's windows was golden and pure and utterly wrong. I sat up carefully, feeling my movements constrained by invisible lines, and looked at Derek beside me. He was still asleep, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision, his painted face peaceful. I got up and went to the door, opened it, stepped out into the clearing. The forest of Gifford Pinchot National Forest stretched around me, perfect and complete. Every tree stood at the ideal angle, every shadow fell exactly where it should. The creek sang with mathematical precision. Even the air felt calibrated, each molecule in its proper place. And the smell of fresh paint had finally faded, replaced by nothing. No scent of pine, no decay, no living earth. Just the neutral emptiness of a finished work. I walked to the tree line and reached out to touch a trunk. My hand met resistance, but not the rough bark of reality. This was smoother, harder, permanent. I looked closely and saw that I was right. Everything was painted. The entire forest, down to the smallest detail, had been rendered in some impossible medium that seemed more real than reality, but was fundamentally false. And I was part of it now. When I looked at my reflection in the RV's painted window, I saw a figure that resembled me but wasn't quite right. Too ideal, too perfect, too finished. The real Penelope, the woman who'd driven here with her husband to save their marriage, was gone. What remained was this painted copy, locked in place, unable to leave because I wasn't separate from the canvas anymore. I was part of it. Derek emerged from the RV, stretching, yawning. He looked at the forest and smiled. "Beautiful morning," he said in that flat, rehearsed voice. "Derek, we have to." But I stopped because there was nothing we had to do. This was it. This was where we lived now, in this perfected moment that would never change, never age, never end. The artist had finished its work, and we were figures in its composition, forever fixed. I heard the brushing sound again, very faint, coming from somewhere beyond the clearing. The artist moving on to another section, another canvas, another transformation. And I understood then that this was happening everywhere, that the whole world was being repainted piece by piece, improved upon, corrected, made perfect and dead and unchanging. We were just the first. Derek put his arm around me, the gesture too smooth, too practiced, and we stood together looking at our painted forest, and the part of me that was still real, still Penelope, still screaming, grew smaller and smaller until it was just a faint detail in the corner of the composition, easy to overlook, easy to ignore. The smell of fresh paint began again. The trees started to shift, and I understood that we would never be finished, that the artist would repaint us again and again and again, refining us endlessly, never quite satisfied, and this would be our existence forever, to be constantly revised, constantly improved upon, constantly erased and rewritten until we were nothing but layers of paint covering layers of paint, covering the memory of what we'd been. Derek smiled at me with his painted face. I tried to smile back, felt the surface of my face crack slightly, felt wet paint seep through. The brushing grew louder. The forest began to change again, and somewhere very far away, in a place I could no longer reach, the real Penelope screamed into the silence while her painted copy stood perfectly still in the clearing off Forest Road 90, waiting to be corrected once more, forever incomplete, forever wet, forever wrong. The smell of fresh paint will never fade. That's what I know now, trapped in this moment that repeats and revises endlessly. Derek has stopped speaking, or rather, he speaks only the same 3 or 4 phrases, cycling through them as the artist adjusts his face, his posture, his expression. Beautiful morning. Should we make coffee? I love you, Pen. Beautiful morning. I want to tell him I love him too. Want to remember what love felt like before it became just another detail to be painted over, but the words stick in my throat, wrong and thick like latex. Through the RV's window, I can see other campers arriving. Or perhaps they've always been here. Perhaps they're being painted into existence even now. They smile their 2 perfect smiles and set up their 2 perfect tents and start their campfires that burn with flames too precisely rendered to be real. They wave at us and we wave back, all of us trapped in our individual moments, all of us being endlessly refined. Sometimes in the space between one brushstroke and the next, I remember Seattle. I remember rain and traffic and arguments over bills and the way Derek's hair stuck up in the morning. I remember being real, being flawed, being alive. But these memories are fading, being painted over with false ones. Memories of perfect camping trips that never happened, of a marriage without conflict, of a life without rough edges or mistakes or humanity. The artist is very thorough. I've tried to escape. Every morning I wake and try to run, but the forest just leads me back to the clearing, back to the RV, back to this moment. And each time I return, I'm a little less Penelope and a little more the painted figure the artist wants me to be. My movements are smoother now, my thoughts more ordered. Even my breathing has become rhythmic, predictable, aesthetic rather than necessary. Derek doesn't try anymore. He's further along than I am, almost complete. Soon he'll be perfect, and then the artist will move on, leaving him frozen in his final form while I continue to be revised and corrected and improved upon. I'm terrified of perfection. I'm terrified of the moment when the brushstrokes stop and I'm sealed forever in this false existence. But I'm also exhausted from fighting it, from trying to hold on to my rough edges and imperfections when everything around me is being smoothed away. The smell of fresh paint intensifies at night. That's when I feel the brushes most clearly, stroking across my skin, my face, the surface of my thoughts. The artist works in darkness, and I'm awake for all of it, feeling myself being unmade and remade, feeling the wet paint of my new self being applied over the dry paint of my old self, layer upon layer upon layer. There's a woman in the painted tent across from our RV. She has my face, or I have hers. Or we're both copies of copies, variations on a theme the artist is exploring. When our eyes meet, I see my own trapped awareness reflected there, and I wonder how many versions of us exist in these endless woods, how many Penelopes are being perfected in how many clearings. The sun is setting now, or rather, the painted sky is being darkened, shadows added with careful precision. Derek is making dinner, moving through the motions with mechanical grace. I sit at the fold-out table and watch him, and I want to cry, but my tear ducts have been painted over, sealed shut, rendered decorative rather than functional. Beautiful evening, Derek says, smiling at me. Yes, I hear myself respond, and my voice is flatter than yesterday, smoother, more correct. The brushing starts again, all around us, and I feel the forest being repainted, improved upon, and I'm so tired of being a work in progress, so tired of being revised, and I think about the people who will come after us, driving down Forest Road 90, smelling that fresh paint smell and dismissing it as forestry work or trail markers or something reasonable, and I want to scream at them to turn back, to run, to never step out of their vehicles into this clearing where the artist waits with infinite patience and infinite brushes and infinite paint. But I can't warn them because I'm not here anymore, not really. What's left of Penelope is just a ghost trapped behind painted eyes, watching as the copy lives her life better than she ever could, cleaner and simpler and perfect and dead. The smell of fresh paint is forever now. It's all I am, all I'll ever be. The artist is never finished. That's the real horror. Not that we're trapped, but that we'll never be complete, never be allowed to settle into even this false existence. We'll be revised and corrected for eternity, always wet, always wrong, always waiting for the next stroke that will make us better, truer, more perfect. And we are. We're so much better now than we were. That's what terrifies me most of all. Story 2. I'm Julian, I'm 34, and I drove my rented RV into the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in Washington State because my marriage was ending and I needed to think. The forest stretched across the southern Cascades like a dark green blanket, dense with Douglas fir and western hemlock, and the ranger at the station told me the campground I'd chosen, Bear Meadow Loop, was quiet this time of year. October meant fewer tourists, colder nights, and the kind of solitude I craved. I'd never been camping alone before, never driven anything bigger than a sedan, but the RV rental place in Portland assured me it was easy, almost automatic. They were wrong about that. The drive up Forest Road 90 took longer than expected. The road narrowed as I climbed, switchbacking through stands of old growth that blocked out the afternoon sun. My phone lost signal around mile marker 7. The RV groaned on the inclines, and twice I had to pull over to let logging trucks barrel past, their drivers staring at me like I didn't belong. Maybe I didn't. Back in Seattle, my wife Amanda was probably packing my things into boxes, her mother helping, both of them relieved I'd finally left. The fights had gotten bad. Not physical, but the kind of bad where you say things you can't unsay, where silence becomes its own kind of violence. Bear Meadow Loop wasn't much of a loop, just a gravel clearing with 6 camping spots arranged in a loose circle around a fire pit. Only one other vehicle occupied the area when I arrived, a newer Winnebago parked at Site 3, its awning extended, a couple of camp chairs set up outside. I pulled into Site 1, the farthest from them, and killed the engine. The silence that followed felt oppressive, like the forest was holding its breath. I'm not mechanically inclined. Setting up the RV should have been simple, but the leveling jacks wouldn't extend properly, and the propane connection hissed in a way that seemed wrong. I spent an hour fumbling with it, sweating despite the cold, before finally getting everything stable enough to feel safe. The sun was setting by then, painting the meadow in shades of orange and purple, beautiful, in a lonely sort of way. The couple from the Winnebago came over around 7. They introduced themselves as Marcus and Jen, late 40s, tanned and outdoorsy in a way that made my pale Seattle complexion seem sickly. Marcus had a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jen was quieter, her gaze sliding past me to study the tree line. "First time at Bear Meadow?" Marcus asked. "First time camping alone," I admitted. "Good spot for it. Peaceful." He glanced back at his wife. "We've been coming here for years, haven't we, Jen?" She nodded, but didn't elaborate. There was something off about her, a tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers kept moving to touch a silver cross hanging from her neck. "You picked a good week," Marcus continued. "Usually gets crowded, but—" He trailed off, looking around the empty campground. "Guess people are spooked." "Spooked of what?" He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Nothing, just local talk. You know how it is in these small forest towns. Everyone's got a ghost story." Jen's fingers tightened on the cross. They didn't stay long after that. Said they were turning in early, had a long hike planned for morning. I watched them walk back to their RV, Marcus's arm around Jen's waist, her body stiff against his. The way she kept looking at the trees made my skin prickle. I built a fire in the communal pit, more for something to do than for warmth. The RV had a heater, but I wanted to feel like a real camper, wanted to prove I could do this. The flames caught quickly, crackling and spitting sparks into the darkening sky. I'd brought a 6-pack of IPA and a paperback thriller I'd been meaning to read, but I couldn't focus on the words. The forest sounds were too distracting. the rustle of wind through branches, the occasional snap of twigs, the distant call of an owl. Around 9, I heard voices. Not from Marcus and Jen's RV. Their lights had gone out an hour ago. These voices came from the woods, south of the campground, multiple people talking in low, urgent tones. I stood from my chair, listening. The voices grew louder, then abruptly stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard footsteps on gravel. Someone was walking the loop. I turned toward the sound, my pulse quickening. The fire cast dancing shadows across the clearing, making it hard to see clearly. The footsteps continued, steady and deliberate, circling the campground. But I couldn't see anyone. "Hello?" My voice came out smaller than intended. The footsteps stopped. I waited, every muscle tensed, but nothing happened. After a full minute of silence, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Or maybe it was an animal, a deer or elk wandering through. I threw dirt on the fire and retreated to the RV, locking the door behind me. The RV's interior felt claustrophobic. Fake wood paneling, a narrow bed, a kitchenette that smelled like previous renters' cooking. I tried to read but kept glancing at the windows, expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. The curtains were thin, offering little privacy or comfort. Eventually, I turned off the lights and lay in the dark, listening to the forest breathe. I don't know what time I woke, but it was still full dark, no hint of dawn. Something had pulled me from sleep. A sound, a feeling I couldn't pinpoint. I lay motionless, listening. Then I heard it, a rhythmic tapping on the RV's exterior wall just behind my head. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate, like someone knocking with their fingernails. I held my breath. The tapping continued for maybe 30 seconds, then moved. It traveled along the wall toward the front of the RV, maintaining that same steady rhythm. When it reached the driver's side window, it stopped. I couldn't move. My body had gone rigid with fear, that primal kind that bypasses rational thought. Minutes passed. The tapping didn't resume. Finally, I forced myself to sit up, to peek through the curtain. The meadow was empty. Moonlight silvered the grass. Nothing moved. I checked my phone. 3:47 a.m. No signal, as expected. I tried to convince myself it had been a branch, wind-blown debris, anything natural, but the tapping had been too measured, too purposeful. Sleep didn't return. I lay in the dark until gray dawn filtered through the curtains, then got up and made instant coffee on the RV's propane stove. My hands shook as I stirred in the powder. Marcus emerged from his RV around 8, stretching and yawning. He waved when he saw me outside. "Sleep okay?" he called. "Not really." He walked over, concern creasing his forehead. "Everything all right?" I almost told him about the tapping, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he'd mentioned people being spooked last night. Or maybe it was just masculine pride, not wanting to seem weak. "Just adjusting to the sounds," I said. "City boy problems." He smiled, but again it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, takes some getting used to. The forest is active at night." Active? Strange word choice. "Where's Jen?" I asked. "Still sleeping. She didn't rest well either." He glanced back at his RV. "Listen, we're going to cut our trip short. Head out this afternoon. You might want to consider doing the same." "Why?" "Just a feeling. This place—" He hesitated. "It doesn't feel right this year." "What do you mean?" But he was already backing away. "Just be careful, okay? Keep your doors locked. Don't go wandering at night." He returned to his RV before I could press further. I watched him go, that prickle of unease growing stronger. What had they experienced? What had they heard? I spent the morning trying to occupy myself. Walked the perimeter of the campground, examined the fire pit, reorganized my supplies. The forest seemed watchful, the spaces between trees pregnant with something I couldn't name. I found myself glancing over my shoulder constantly, certain I was being observed. Around noon, I decided to hike the trail the ranger had mentioned, a 2-mile loop that led to a waterfall. Exercise would clear my head, burn off the anxiety. I left a note on my RV door saying where I'd gone and when I'd be back, though I couldn't say why. Who would read it? The trailhead started just past the campground's eastern edge. The path was well maintained but narrow, forcing me to walk single file through walls of ferns and salal. The forest floor was soft with decades of decaying needles, muffling my footsteps. Mist clung to the canopy, giving everything a dreamlike quality. I'd gone maybe half a mile when I found the tent. It was set up just off the trail, partially hidden by undergrowth. A small dome tent, green and weathered, its fly sagging with moisture. No one was around. No camp chairs, no gear visible, just the tent. Something about it felt wrong, like finding a child's toy abandoned in a cemetery. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" No response. I approached slowly, irrationally certain that something terrible waited inside. The tent's zipper was open, the flap hanging loose. I crouched and peered in. Empty. Completely empty. Not even a sleeping bag. Why would someone set up a tent and leave nothing inside? I backed away, my heart hammering. The forest seemed darker suddenly, the mist thicker. I continued up the trail, walking faster now, eager to reach the waterfall and turn back. I never reached the waterfall. The trail forked after another quarter-mile, something that hadn't been on the map the ranger gave me. Left or right, no markers to indicate which way to go. I chose left, reasoning I could always backtrack. But after 10 minutes of walking, I hit another fork, then another. The trail was multiplying, branching like veins, and I'd lost all sense of direction. My phone was useless for navigation. I tried to retrace my steps but couldn't find the previous junction. The forest looked the same in every direction, endless columns of fir trees, curtains of mist, silence broken only by my own breathing. Panic began to set in, that suffocating feeling of being lost, truly lost, with darkness coming in a few hours. I walked for what felt like an eternity, choosing directions at random until I finally stumbled back onto what looked like the main trail. Relief flooded through me. I hurried downhill, following the path back to what I prayed was the campground. I emerged from the tree line an hour later, exhausted and shaking. But something was wrong. There was a second RV parked next to mine. I stopped at the edge of the clearing, staring. It was identical to my rental. Same model, same color, even the same rental company logo on the side. It sat in Site 2, between my RV and Marcus and Jen's Winnebago. But I hadn't seen it arrive. I'd been gone less than 3 hours. I walked closer, dread building with each step. The RV's door was closed, curtains drawn. I circled around to the driver's side and felt my stomach drop. The license plate matched mine. Exactly. I checked my keys, my rental agreement, everything in my pockets. This was impossible. I looked at my RV in Site 1, then at the duplicate in Site 2. Same mud on the wheel wells, same small dent in the bumper where I'd scraped a parking meter in Portland. "Marcus!" I shouted toward the Winnebago. "Marcus, come out here." No response. Their RV sat silent, lights off, awning retracted. Maybe they'd already left like they'd planned. I was alone with 2 versions of my rental. I approached the duplicate, my hand trembling as I reached for the door handle. Locked. I cupped my hands against the window, trying to see through the curtains. Movement inside, a shadow passing. Someone was in there. I knocked. "Hello? Who's in there?" The shadow stopped. Then the door clicked and swung open. I was looking at myself. He stood in the doorway wearing the same clothes I'd put on this morning. The same watch, the same day-old stubble. His eyes met mine with an expression I couldn't read. Not hostile, not friendly, just blank. "You're not supposed to be back yet," he said. My voice. Exactly my voice. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. "The hike," he continued. "You were supposed to get lost. Stay out there until dark." He tilted his head, studying me. "You came back too soon." "What are you?" I finally managed. "What are you?" he echoed. "That's the real question, isn't it, Julian?" He smiled, and it was my smile, but all wrong, the muscles pulling at angles that didn't quite match human anatomy. "This place takes what it wants. Makes copies. You should have left when the tapping started. The tapping. He knew about the tapping. Where are Marcus and Jen? I demanded. Gone. They were smart. Felt it happening and ran. He stepped down from the RV, and I stumbled backward. But you're alone. Separated. Perfect. I ran. Didn't think. Just turned and sprinted for my RV. Behind me, I heard him laugh. My laugh, as his footsteps crunched on gravel. I threw open my RV door, lunged inside, slammed it shut, and engaged the locks. My hands fumbled for the keys, dropped them, grabbed them again. A face appeared in the window. My face. He pressed his palms against the glass, fingers splayed wide. There's no leaving, he said. The forest doesn't let duplicates escape together. One of us has to go back. Go back where? Into the trees? Into whatever nightmare had created him? I turned the ignition. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. I threw it into gear and stomped the accelerator. The RV lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. In the rear-view mirror, I saw him standing in the clearing, watching me go, making no attempt to follow. The forest road blurred past. I drove too fast, the RV swaying dangerously on curves, but I couldn't slow down. I had to get out, had to reach civilization, people, anything. The duplicate's words echoed in my head. One of us has to go back. I'd gone maybe 5 miles when I saw the roadblock. Trees had fallen across the road, massive Douglas firs crisscrossing to form an impenetrable barrier. I slammed the brakes, the RV skidding to a stop inches from the timber. No way through, no way around. The forest pressed too close on either side. I sat there, engine idling, trying to think. I'd have to back up, find another route. But when I shifted into reverse and checked the mirror, my blood went cold. The duplicate was standing directly behind the RV. He shouldn't have been able to follow on foot, not at the speed I'd been driving. But there he was, arms crossed, that wrong smile playing at his lips. I watched in the mirror as he walked forward, closing the distance. He pressed his palms against the rear window. "Time to choose, Julian," his muffled voice carried through the glass. "Either you go back, or I make you go back." I threw the RV into drive and spun the wheel hard, trying to turn around on the narrow road. The vehicle lurched, tires churning dirt. The duplicate didn't move, didn't flinch as I maneuvered. He just watched with my eyes, patient, knowing. I got the RV pointed back toward the campground and accelerated. He vanished from view. But as I drove, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. The same trees repeated, identical patterns of moss and branches. I passed the same distinctive boulder 3 times. The road was looping, folding back on itself like a Mobius strip. After an hour of driving, I returned to Bear Meadow Loop. Both RVs were still there. Mine in Site 1, the duplicates in Site 2. Marcus and Jen's Winnebago was gone. They'd escaped after all. I parked in my original spot and killed the engine, too exhausted and terrified to cry. Night was falling. I sat in the driver's seat, watching the duplicate's RV through the windshield. No movement, no lights. What was he doing in there? Waiting. Planning. The rational part of my mind tried to find explanations. Stress-induced hallucination, carbon monoxide poisoning from the RV's heater, a psychological break triggered by the divorce. But rationality held no weight against what I'd seen, what I'd experienced. I needed supplies, food, water, anything I could use to defend myself or survive. I'd been planning a 2-day trip. My provisions were limited. I'd have to go outside, move between the RVs, risk exposure, unless I didn't need to. The thought came unbidden, sickening. What if I just left? Walked away from both RVs, hiked out on foot. I'd seen the duplicate only near the vehicles. Maybe the forest's magic or curse or whatever this was had limits. Maybe I could escape on foot where the RV couldn't go. I gathered what I could carry. Water bottles, granola bars. My phone, even though it was useless. A flashlight. The bear mace I'd bought but never thought I'd need. The forest was fully dark now. No moon, clouds obscuring the stars. The duplicate's RV remained silent. I eased my door open, the interior light seeming bright as a flare. Every shadow could hide him. I climbed down, keeping the RV between myself and Site 2, and started toward the trailhead. My footsteps sounded thunderous on the gravel. I made it 10 feet. Leaving without saying goodbye? The voice came from directly behind me. I spun, raising the bear mace. The duplicate stood inches away, so close I could smell him. And he smelled like me, my soap, my sweat, my fear. "You can't run from yourself," he said. "That's what this place teaches. You carry your shadow everywhere." "I'm not your shadow," I gasped. "You're not real." "Am I not?" He reached out and touched my chest, his finger pressing over my heart. His hand was solid, warm, indistinguishable from living flesh. "I have your memories, Julian. Every moment. I remember Amanda's face when you called her a bitch. I remember your father's funeral and how you didn't cry because you felt nothing. I remember the affair you had last year with the woman from your office, how you told yourself it didn't count because Amanda had emotionally checked out first." Each word hit like a physical blow. These were things I'd never told anyone, secrets buried so deep I barely acknowledged them myself. "I'm everything you are," he continued, with all the pretense stripped away. "The forest makes us face what we really are. It creates a mirror and asks a question. Which version is real?" I fired the bear mace directly into his face. He didn't flinch, didn't scream. The spray passed through him like mist, and I realized with horror that he wasn't entirely solid anymore. His edges were blurring, becoming translucent, as if he was only partially present in this reality. "Violence won't work," he said, his voice echoing strangely. "This isn't that kind of story. You have to choose." "Choose what?" "To go back, into the forest. Become what it wants you to become. Or," he gestured toward the RV, "stay. Accept that you're the copy. Let me leave and take your life." "That's insane." "Is it? Think about it. You came here to escape, to leave everything behind. Now you can. Permanently. I'll go back to Seattle, live your life, fix your marriage or end it properly. You'll stay here, with the others." "Others?" His smile widened. "Did you think you were the first? This place has been collecting for decades. All the lost hikers, the disappeared campers. They're still here, Julian. In the trees, in the ground, wearing faces like masks." I looked past him into the darkness beyond the clearing. And now that he'd said it, I could see them, shapes between the trees, dozens of them, standing motionless, watching. Some looked recent, their clothes modern. Others wore styles from decades past. All of them had that same wrong quality, that sense of being slightly off, copies that hadn't quite captured the original. "Join them," the duplicate whispered, "or let me go. Those are your options." I ran again, but this time toward my RV. I had one advantage: the keys. If I could get inside, drive, maybe the forest would release me if I was the one behind the wheel. The duplicate didn't chase me this time. He just stood there, growing more transparent, fading. I reached the RV, threw open the door, jumped into the driver's seat. The engine started immediately. I reversed hard, swung around, and gunned it toward the forest road. The figures between the trees didn't move as I passed. They simply watched, silent witnesses to my escape. The road stretched ahead, clearer now, as if the forest was allowing my passage. I drove faster, taking curves that should have tipped the RV but somehow didn't. The trees blurred past. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly they cramped. I drove until dawn broke, pale light filtering through the canopy. The forest began to thin. I saw power lines, then a paved road, then a gas station appearing like a mirage. I pulled in, parked next to the pumps, and sat there shaking. A teenager came out of the convenience store looking bored in his blue vest. "Fill it up." "Where am I?" My voice came out hoarse. Cougar, on Route 503? He looked concerned. "You okay, man?" Cougar. I'd made it to a town. I was out. The next few hours passed in a blur. I called the RV rental company, told them where to pick up the vehicle. I called a cab, waited outside the gas station while elementary school kids walked past on their way to school. Everything so beautifully normal it made me want to weep. The cab took me to Portland. I checked into a hotel and slept for 16 hours. When I woke, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. I tried Amanda's number. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Hello?" Amanda's voice cautious. "It's me," I said. A pause. "Julian, where are you? You were supposed to be back yesterday. Something happened at the campground. I need to see you." "Okay." She sounded uncertain. "Are you all right? You sound strange." "I'm in Portland. I'll drive up tonight." "Drive safely," she said and hung up. I stared at the phone. Something about the conversation felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. I showered, dressed, checked out of the hotel. The drive to Seattle took 3 hours. I pulled up to our house, my house, around 7 p.m. The lights were on. Amanda's car sat in the driveway. I walked to the front door, my key ready, but before I could use it, the door opened. Amanda stood there, smiling. "You made it." But her smile was wrong. The muscles pulled at angles that didn't quite match human anatomy. "Come in," she said in her voice, but not her voice. "We've been waiting." Behind her, I saw movement. Someone stepped into the hallway. He had my face, my body, my clothes, the duplicate. He'd made it out before me. He'd been here for hours, maybe days, living my life. "Hello, Julian," he said. "Welcome home." I stepped backward, stumbling off the porch. Amanda, or what wore Amanda's skin, reached for me. "Don't be afraid. The forest sent you back to collect. That's what we do. We go back, find new candidates, bring them here. You'll understand soon." I ran to my car, fumbled with the keys. They grabbed for me but moved slowly, as if the act of maintaining their human disguises took concentration. I got the car started, threw it into reverse. As I backed down the driveway, I saw others emerging from neighboring houses, Mrs. Peterson from next door, the Johnsons from across the street, all wearing that same wrong smile, all moving with that same strange gait. How long had they been here? How many were there? I drove with no destination, just drove, while night fell around me. My phone rang, Amanda's number. I didn't answer. It rang again, and again. Finally, a voicemail. I listened to it on speakerphone. "You can't run forever," Amanda's voice said. "The forest is everywhere, in every tree, every shadow. You're one of us now, Julian. Accept it. Come home." I ended the call and threw the phone out the window. I'm writing this from a motel in a nowhere town off I-5, using a public library computer because I'm afraid to use my own accounts. I don't know what to do. I don't know if anywhere is safe. The couple at the front desk looked at me strangely when I checked in, their smiles just a little too wide. I saw myself in the bathroom mirror an hour ago, and I swear my reflection blinked a second after I did. I don't know who I am anymore. The duplicate had all my memories, all my thoughts. He was me in every measurable way. So what does that make me? The original or just another copy? The forest takes what it wants, he said. Makes copies. But here's what terrifies me most. I can't remember the exact moment when I left the campground. I remember getting in the RV, starting the engine, but the drive itself is fuzzy, dreamlike. What if I never left? What if I'm the duplicate, programmed to believe I'm real, sent out to find others? What if I've been one of them all along? I don't sleep anymore. When I close my eyes, I see the forest, feel its pull. It wants me back, or maybe it wants me to bring others. I don't know which is worse. Yesterday, I saw a man at a truck stop who looked exactly like the duplicate, or maybe it was him. He smiled at me, that wrong smile, and raised his hand in a wave. I didn't wave back. I got in my car and drove for 6 hours straight. There's no escaping. That's what I'm starting to understand. The forest doesn't need to chase me. It's patient. It knows I'll come back eventually, because there's nowhere else to go. Every road loops. Every destination is temporary. The world itself is the trap. I thought about going to the police, the FBI, the media, but what would I say? That a forest is making human copies and replacing people? They'd institutionalize me, and maybe that's where the others are waiting. Maybe that's the next stage. Sometimes I wonder if Amanda was already replaced before I left for the camping trip. If that's why our marriage fell apart, not because of us, but because she wasn't her anymore. How long had the forest been infiltrating Seattle? How many of my friends, my co-workers, my family were copies? How do I know my own thoughts are mine? I found a knife in my motel room yesterday. I don't remember putting it there. It was just on the nightstand when I came out of the shower, clean and sharp. I stared at it for an hour, understanding what it was offering. A way out. If I'm a copy, maybe destroying this body would end the connection, send me back to whatever processing plant the forest maintains. But I'm afraid. Not of death. I'm afraid of what comes after. Of waking up in that meadow, standing between the trees with all the others, wearing faces like masks, waiting for someone new to arrive. I'm afraid I'm already there. I keep checking mirrors, looking for tells, for anything that might prove I'm real. But what does real even mean? The duplicate had my DNA, my memories, my scars. He was indistinguishable from me in every way that matters. So, which one of us was Julian Mercer? The one who stayed or the one who left? The forest gives you a choice, but it's an impossible choice. Accept that you're the copy and join the others, or believe you're real and spend the rest of your life running from shadows. Either way, the forest wins. Either way, you're trapped. Last night I dreamed I was back at Bear Meadow Loop. Both RVs were still there side by side, but now there were dozens more, an entire parking lot of identical vehicles stretching into the forest. I walked among them, looking in windows, and in each one I saw myself sleeping, dreaming, writing this exact story. When I woke, my laptop was open to this document, but I'd written 3 more paragraphs I don't remember typing. They described me walking back to the forest, joining the others between the trees, standing motionless, watching, waiting. I deleted them. I'm going to post this online, everywhere I can think of. Maybe someone will read it and understand. Maybe they'll avoid Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, Bear Meadow Loop specifically. Maybe I can save someone. Or maybe I'm doing exactly what the forest wants, spreading the story, planting the seed. Maybe everyone who reads this is now vulnerable, their subconscious marked with coordinates and images that will draw them there eventually. Maybe that's how it spreads. I don't know anymore. All I know is I'm typing this in a McDonald's parking lot at 3 in the morning, my car filled with everything I own, no destination in mind. The kid working the drive-thru stared at me too long when I ordered coffee. His name tag said Kevin, but his smile was wrong. My phone is ringing again. I bought a burner yesterday, new number, told no one. But it's ringing. The caller ID says, home. I'm not going to answer. I'm going to drive south, maybe Mexico, somewhere warm where forests don't grow so thick. But even as I think it, I know it won't work. The forest isn't a place. It's a concept, a force, a hunger that exists wherever there's isolation and darkness and the thin spaces where reality frays. It's already here. It's already everywhere. And I'm so tired of running. Maybe if I just pull over, close my eyes, let whatever happens, happen. Would that be so bad? To stop fighting, stop wondering, stop carrying this crushing weight of uncertainty about my own existence? The sun is rising now, pink light touching the mountains. I should feel hope, relief, all those sunrise emotions. But I don't feel anything, just hollow, like a cup that's been emptied out and placed back on the shelf. I wonder if this is how they all felt, in those final moments before they stopped being themselves. If there was peace in the surrender. I'm going to drive for 1 more hour. If I see anything suspicious, any sign that the forest has followed me here, I'll do what needs to be done. The knife is in the glove compartment. Sharp enough, quick enough, but I have a terrible suspicion it won't end anything. That I'll close my eyes here and open them there, standing between the trees with all the others, finally understanding what I really am. The forest takes what it wants, makes copies, and I'm starting to think I was never the original at all. Story 3. I'm Hazel, 34 years old, and I woke at the Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming with ash on my hands. That first morning should have been a warning. I'd pulled my motorhome into a remote campsite off the Chief Joseph Scenic Highway 3 days earlier, looking for the kind of silence you can't buy in the city. The kind that makes your ears ring. The kind that lets you hear yourself think, or stop thinking entirely, which was what I needed after the year I'd had. My mother's long decline. The funeral. The empty house I couldn't bring myself to sell. The promotion I turned down because it felt obscene to celebrate anything. So I'd rented a modest Class C RV, loaded it with enough supplies for 2 weeks, and driven 12 hours from Denver into the high country where the Absaroka Mountains cut jagged silhouettes against an impossibly blue sky. The campsite was primitive. No hookups, no neighbors, just a clearing surrounded by lodgepole pines and the distant sound of Dead Indian Creek trickling through the ravine below. When I woke that first morning and looked at my hands, they were covered in fine gray ash. Not dirt, ash. The kind you get from burned wood, except I hadn't built a fire the night before. I'd been too exhausted from the drive, had just heated a can of soup on my propane stove and collapsed into the bed above the cab around 8 o'clock as the last light bled from the sky. I stared at my palms in the thin morning light filtering through the curtains. The ash was packed under my fingernails, ground into the lines of my skin. I could taste it on my tongue. Bitter, chemical. I sat up quickly, my head swimming, and checked my feet. They were dirty, too, the soles blackened as if I'd been walking barefoot through a fire pit. But there was no fire pit. I looked out the window at the clearing. No trace of fire, no smoke. The morning was crystalline and cold, my breath fogging the glass. I told myself I must have been sleepwalking. I'd done it as a child, my mother finding me standing in the backyard in my nightgown at 2 in the morning, staring at nothing. The habit had faded as I grew older, but grief does strange things to the mind. Maybe I'd wandered outside in some kind of fugue state, found an old campfire somewhere in the woods, knelt in it for reasons my sleeping brain couldn't articulate. I washed my hands in the tiny RV sink, scrubbing until the water ran clear, then got dressed and made coffee. The rational explanation satisfied me for exactly as long as it took me to step outside. The ground around my RV was covered in footprints, bare footprints, small ones, my size. They circled the vehicle in overlapping loops, scuffing the pine needles and dirt into confused whirls. I followed them with my eyes. They led away from the RV toward the tree line, then disappeared into the undergrowth about 30 feet from where I stood. I should have left then, packed up and driven back to civilization. But I didn't, because the footprints also led back. They returned to the RV, stopped at the door, and vanished, meaning I, or whatever had been wearing my feet, had made it back inside. I stood there holding my coffee mug, feeling the steam curl against my face, and told myself again, sleepwalking. Nothing more. I spent the day trying to settle in. I took a short hike down to the creek, marveling at how the water was so cold it made my teeth ache when I splashed it on my face. I read a book in a folding chair outside the RV, letting the sun warm my shoulders. I cooked an early dinner, pasta with canned sauce, and watched the light change as evening approached. The forest grew dense with shadow. The temperature dropped fast. By 7 o'clock, I was back inside with the door locked and the curtains drawn. I told myself this was normal caution, not fear, but my hands shook slightly as I poured a glass of wine. That night, I forced myself to stay awake. I sat at the small dinette table with my book and my wine, determined to catch myself if I started to sleepwalk again. I would not wake up with ash on my hands. I would not wake up wondering where I'd been. But exhaustion is a patient predator. Around 11, my eyes started to drift closed. I jerked awake, shook my head, drank more wine, a mistake since it only made me drowsier. By midnight, I was losing the battle. I stumbled to the bed above the cab, fully clothed, and told myself I'd just rest my eyes for a minute. When I opened them again, it was still dark. Completely dark, no hint of dawn. I was standing outside the RV. The cold hit me first, a shock of it that made me gasp. I was barefoot, wearing only my jeans and t-shirt, no jacket. The forest around me was utterly black. No moon, no stars visible through the canopy. just darkness so thick it seemed to have weight. I spun around, disoriented, and saw the RV about 15 feet behind me. The door was open. Pale light spilled from the interior, making a rectangle on the ground. "Jesus," I whispered. My voice sounded wrong. Too loud and too small at the same time, like the trees were swallowing the sound before it could travel. I took a step toward the RV, and that's when I heard it. Breathing, not mine, someone else's. Slow and steady, coming from the darkness to my left. I froze, every muscle in my body locked. The breathing continued, rhythmic and wet, like whoever it was had fluid in their lungs. "Who's there?" I managed. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I could hear my own heartbeat hammering in my ears, could hear the faint whisper of wind in the pine tops high above. But nothing else. No insects, no night birds, no small animals rustling in the undergrowth. I ran. I didn't think about it, didn't try to be brave or reasonable. I just bolted for the RV, my bare feet slamming against the cold ground, and threw myself through the open door. I yanked it shut and locked it, then stood panting in the narrow space, staring at the flimsy aluminum barrier between me and whatever was out there. Nothing happened, no sound of pursuit, no scratching at the door, just silence. I turned on every light in the RV, the overhead, the reading lamp, the light above the stove, flooding the small space with harsh brightness. Then I checked my hands. Ash. Again. More of it this time, coating my palms and fingers like I'd been sifting through the remains of a bonfire. I went to the sink and washed, scrubbing hard enough to make my skin red. When I looked up at my reflection in the small mirror above the sink, I barely recognized myself. My eyes were wild, pupils blown wide. My hair was full of pine needles and small twigs. There was a smudge of ash on my forehead, right between my eyebrows like some kind of mark. I touched it, and my fingertip came away gray. The rest of the night I spent wedged into the dinette booth with a knife from the kitchen drawer in my lap. I didn't sleep. I watched the windows, waiting for a face to appear in the glass, for fingers to scratch at the door. But nothing came. The forest outside remained dark and silent. Dawn arrived slowly, the darkness thinning to gray, then to the pale blue of early morning. When there was enough light to see by, I unlocked the door and stepped outside. More footprints. The same small bare feet, circling the RV in those strange overlapping patterns, but this time there was something else. A pile of ashes about 10 feet from my door. Not scattered, piled deliberately about knee-high, arranged in a neat cone like someone had carefully constructed it. The ashes were still warm when I crouched beside them and held my hand near the surface. I could feel the heat radiating from within. There were things in the ashes. I saw them glinting in the early light, and, against every instinct screaming at me to get back in the RV and leave, I reached in and pulled one out. A tooth. Small and white, like a child's baby tooth. I dropped it and stumbled backward. My heel caught on something and I sat down hard, jarring my tailbone. When I looked down, I saw what I'd tripped over. A circle of stones. Small river rocks, arranged in a perfect ring about 3 feet in diameter, with my RV at the exact center of a much larger circle I couldn't see from ground level but could suddenly intuit. I was inside something. Some kind of boundary. I got to my feet and walked the perimeter. The stones continued, making a circle approximately 40 feet across, with my RV parked in the dead center. The stones were evenly spaced, each one about the size of my fist, placed with geometric precision. They hadn't been there when I'd arrived. I would have noticed. You don't park in the middle of a stone circle without realizing it, which meant someone, or something, had built it around me while I slept. I should have left, I know that, but I didn't, because along with the fear, I felt something else, curiosity, and something darker that I didn't want to name, a kind of gravitational pull, like the forest was exerting some force on me that made the idea of leaving feel impossible, like trying to swim against a riptide. I told myself I'd stay one more night, just to see what happened, just to understand. That day, I tried to explore. I wanted to find evidence of other campers, some rational explanation for the stone circle and the ash piles. But every time I tried to walk beyond the circle, I felt wrong. My vision would blur. My stomach would lurch. Once, I made it about 10 steps past the stones before I had to stop and vomit in the bushes, retching until nothing came up but bile. The forest beyond the circle looked normal. Pine trees, fallen logs, patches of wildflowers, but it felt hostile, like I was trespassing somewhere I had no business being. So I stayed inside the circle. I sat in my folding chair and read the same page of my book 17 times without absorbing a word. I made lunch and couldn't eat it. I watched the sun track across the sky and felt time moving strangely, too fast and too slow at once. As evening approached, the dread set in like a physical weight on my chest. I kept thinking about the breathing in the dark, the wet, labored sound of it, and the footprints, my footprints, leading away and back, away and back. What had I been doing out there? I locked myself in the RV again before full dark. This time, I wedged the door shut with a chair and piled my duffel bags against it. I checked the windows, making sure the latches were secure. Then I sat at the dinette with the knife again, determined to stay awake. But I was so tired. The exhaustion was like gravity, pulling me down. My eyes kept closing. I pinched myself, bit my tongue, stood up and did jumping jacks in the narrow aisle. Nothing helped. The drowsiness was unnatural, like something was pumping sleep into the air itself. At some point, I gave in. I have no memory of deciding to lie down, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up, standing in the forest. Again. This time, I was much farther from the RV. I could barely see its lights through the trees, just a faint glow in the distance. I was deeper in the woods, surrounded by darkness so complete that I couldn't see my own hands when I held them up in front of my face. But I could see the fire. It was ahead of me, maybe 20 feet away. A small fire built in a pit, flames dancing low and blue, the wrong color. Fire shouldn't burn blue like that unless there's something chemical in it, but this was wood fire. I could see the logs arranged in a careful stack, and there was someone sitting beside it. A figure. Small, child-sized. They had their back to me, hunched over, doing something I couldn't see. The firelight threw their shadow long across the ground. "Hello?" My voice cracked. The figure didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me at all. They just kept moving, their hands working at something in their lap. I took a step closer. The forest floor was soft under my bare feet, not cold anymore, but warm, almost feverish. I could smell the smoke from the fire, and underneath it, something else. Something rotten. "Can you help me?" I tried again. "I'm lost." The figure's hands stopped moving. Then, slowly, too slowly, like a film played at the wrong speed, they turned their head. They had no face. Where their features should have been was just smooth skin, unbroken and pale as milk in the firelight. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just blank flesh. I wanted to scream, but couldn't. My throat had closed. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, standing there while the faceless child thing stared at me with eyes that didn't exist. Then it spoke. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing its absent mouth entirely. "You shouldn't have come here." The paralysis broke. I turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth, branches tearing at my clothes and face. I ran without direction, without thought, just pure animal terror driving me forward. Behind me, I could hear the fire crackling and something else. Footsteps, small footsteps, running after me. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours, like miles, but it couldn't have been. The forest should have been finite. I should have hit a road or a creek or something, but I just kept running through endless trees, the darkness pressing in on all sides. Then I saw the RV lights, just a glimpse through the trees. I changed direction, sprinting toward them, and burst out of the tree line into the clearing. The stone circle. I was back inside it. The RV sat in the center, lights blazing. I ran to the door and grabbed the handle. Locked. I'd locked it from the inside, and I'd been outside when I woke up, which meant which meant something had unlocked it, had opened the door, had let me out, or I'd done it myself, sleepwalking, and locked it again, and then kept walking. I slammed my palm against the door, trying to remember where I'd put the spare key. Had I even brought a spare key? Behind me, something stepped out of the tree line. I turned. The faceless child stood at the edge of the circle, right at the boundary marked by the stones. In the RV's light, I could see it clearly now. It was wearing old-fashioned clothes, a simple dress that might have been white once but was now stained and gray. Its feet were bare. Its hands hung at its sides, fingers too long, joints bending in too many places. "You keep coming back," it said in that voice from everywhere. "Every night you come to the fire. You kneel in the ashes. You put them on your face and hands. You're trying to remember." "Remember what?" I heard myself ask. "What you did." The door of the RV swung open behind me. I hadn't heard it unlock, but it was open now, and I stumbled backward through it, my eyes still locked on the thing at the edge of the circle. It tilted its head, considering me. "You can't leave," it said. "Not until you remember, not until you burn." Then it turned and walked back into the forest, disappearing into the darkness between the trees. I slammed the door and locked it, then collapsed on the floor, shaking. My hands were covered in ash again. My feet were black with it. I could taste it in my mouth, bitter and chemical and wrong. I crawled to the sink and washed, scrubbing until my skin was raw. Then I checked every window, every latch, making sure everything was secure. I dragged the mattress down from the cab and wedged it against the door. I took every heavy thing I could find, canned goods, books, my duffel bags, and piled them on top of the mattress. Then I sat with my back against the far wall, the knife in my lap, and waited for morning. But morning didn't come. The darkness outside remained absolute. I checked my watch. It said 3:17 a.m. I waited. Checked again. 3:17 a.m. The numbers didn't change. Time had stopped, or I was caught in some fold of it, some loop that wouldn't let me reach dawn. Hours passed, or seemed to. My watch insisted it was still 3:17. The darkness outside never thinned. I was trapped. At some point I must have dozed off despite myself because I came to with a jolt, suddenly aware that something had changed. The RV was silent. Too silent. The faint hum of the propane fridge had stopped. All the lights were off, and the pile of things I'd stacked against the door was scattered across the floor. The door itself was open. I sat up slowly, my heart trip hammering. Through the open door, I could see the clearing bathed in a strange gray light. Not dawn, but something else, something sourceless and flat. The trees beyond the stone circle looked wrong, their trunks too straight, their branches too symmetrical, like someone had drawn them according to a template. I stood up, even though every instinct told me to stay put. I walked to the door and looked out. The faceless child was standing beside the ash pile. There were more of them now. 5, 6, maybe 7. I couldn't count them because they wouldn't stay still, shifting and flickering like images on a faulty screen. Some were tall, some were short. Some wore old clothes, others were naked. But they all had the same smooth, featureless faces. They were building something. As I watched, they bent down and scooped handfuls of ash, shaping it, pressing it into forms. They worked silently, efficiently, their 2 long fingers molding the gray powder into shapes I couldn't quite make out. Then one of them turned and looked directly at me. "Come," it said. And I did. I didn't want to. I tried to stop myself, tried to grab the door frame, but my body moved without my permission. I stepped down from the RV, my bare feet touching the cold ground, and walked toward them. The faceless children parted to let me through. I reached the ash pile and looked down at what they'd been building. A body, human-sized, made entirely of ash, lying on its back with its arms folded across its chest. The details were crude but recognizable. Fingers, toes, the suggestion of features on the face. "Kneel," one of them said. I knelt. "Remember." And suddenly, I did. The memory crashed into me like a wave, pulling me under. I was 7 years old, playing in the woods behind my grandmother's house in Wyoming. There was another girl with me, Sarah, a neighbor's kid I barely knew. We'd been exploring, pretending to be explorers in uncharted territory. We'd found a clearing. There'd been a stone circle just like this one, and in the center, a pile of old ashes from some long-dead fire. Sarah had wanted to leave, but I'd wanted to stay. I thought it was cool, mysterious. I'd knelt beside the ashes and scooped them up in my hands, letting them run through my fingers. Sarah had told me to stop, had said it felt wrong, that we should go. I'd gotten angry. I didn't know why. Maybe because I didn't like being told what to do, or maybe because some part of me already felt the pull of the place, the hook in my chest that wanted to stay. We'd argued. Sarah had grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away from the ashes. I'd pushed her. Not hard, just a shove, the kind kids do 100 times without thinking about it. But Sarah had stumbled backward, her heel catching on one of the stones. She'd fallen. Her head had hit another stone with a sound I can still hear in my nightmares, a wet crack, like an egg breaking. She hadn't gotten up. I'd run. Panic-blind, 7 years old and terrified, I'd run all the way back to my grandmother's house and hidden in my room. I'd never told anyone. And when the search started, when police came around asking if anyone had seen Sarah, I'd lied. I'd said we'd split up hours earlier, that I'd come home alone. They'd found her body 3 days later. The official report said she'd been playing in the woods and had fallen, hit her head. An accident. No one ever connected me to it. No one had ever known we'd been together that day. And I'd buried it. Pushed it so far down in my memory that I'd forgotten it happened. I'd convinced myself I'd never known Sarah at all, that the whole thing was just a tragic story I'd heard about once. But the forest remembered. The circle remembered. And now, it wanted payment. I came back to myself kneeling in the ashes, my hands black with them, tears streaming down my face. The faceless children stood around me in their flickering, uncertain way. "You killed her here," one of them said. Her blood sank into the ground. Her spirit couldn't leave. The circle keeps her, keeps all of us. I looked up at them, understanding dawning like a sick sunrise. "You're all dead. Yes, we died in circles like this. Died and couldn't leave. The ashes mark us. The stones bind us." "But I didn't mean to," I whispered. "It was an accident. I was 7. Intention doesn't matter. Only the act. Only the blood." The ash body on the ground began to move. Its chest rose and fell as if it were breathing. Its fingers twitched. Then its eyes opened. Real eyes. Not ash, but wet and brown and terrified. Sarah's eyes. "No," I said, scrambling backward. "No, no, no." "You have to burn," the children said in unison. "The circle demands it. You came back. You kept coming back year after year, even though you didn't remember. The circle pulls its debts home, and now you're home." The ash Sarah sat up. Her mouth opened and ash poured out instead of words. She reached for me with gray fingers. I ran. I broke through the circle of faceless children and ran for the RV. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps making no sound but their voices rising in a chorus. Burn, burn, burn. I reached the RV and threw myself inside, slamming the door. But I knew it was useless. They'd just open it again. They'd unlocked it every night, had let me sleepwalk out to their fire, to their ashes, trying to make me remember. And now I had. Through the window, I could see them gathering. More than before. Dozens of them, faceless children forming a ring around the RV. They were holding hands, their 2 long fingers interlaced, and they were swaying back and forth like grass in wind. The RV began to shake. At first, I thought it was just my fear making me feel unsteady, but then a cup fell off the counter and shattered. The cabinets flew open. Canned goods tumbled out, rolling across the tilting floor. They were tipping the RV over. I grabbed the counter, trying to stay upright, but the angle grew steeper. The whole vehicle groaned, metal creaking. I tumbled toward the back as it tilted, slamming into the wall. Outside, I could hear them. Not laughing because they had no mouths, but making some kind of sound, a high keening that vibrated in my bones. The RV went over with a tremendous crash. I fell hard, hitting my head on something, the table edge maybe, and saw stars. When my vision cleared, I was lying on what had been the wall, staring up at what had been the floor. The door was above me now, impossible to reach, but the windows. I crawled to the nearest window, my head pounding, and tried to unlatch it. My fingers were clumsy, shaking. The latch wouldn't budge. I grabbed a can of beans and smashed it against the window. The glass cracked but didn't break. Outside, the faceless children pressed against the overturned RV. Their blank faces filled the windows, crowding against the glass. Their hands left smudges, gray prints that looked like ash. I hit the window again, and again. The cracks spiderwebbed. One more hit, and it shattered, safety glass falling in a cascade of tiny cubes. I pulled myself through, cutting my hands on the remaining shards, and dropped to the ground outside. The children were waiting. They formed a solid wall around the overturned RV, blocking every direction. I turned in a slow circle looking for a gap, but there was none. They stood shoulder to shoulder, swaying in that awful synchronized way. "I'm sorry," I said. My voice sounded small. "I'm so sorry. I was a kid. I didn't mean to." "Please," they said nothing. Just stood there, faceless and silent. Then, as one, they stepped aside. They opened a path through their ranks, leading away from the RV toward the tree line, toward the forest beyond the circle. "Go," their collective voice said. "Run." I didn't trust it, but I didn't have a choice. I took a tentative step toward the path they'd opened. They didn't move to stop me. I took another step, then another, walking between the rows of blank faces. They watched me pass. I could feel their eyeless stare. When I reached the edge of the circle, I stopped. The forest beyond looked impossibly dark. I turned back to look at the children. "What happens if I cross?" "You leave the circle," they said. "You break the boundary, and what waits outside will find you." What waits outside? What you're owed. I stood at the edge for a long moment, my bare feet inches from the line of stones. Behind me, the faceless children waited. Ahead of me, the dark forest breathed. I thought about my mother, about the year I'd spent watching her die by inches, cancer eating her from the inside while I sat helpless, about all the times I'd wished it would just end, that she would just go, so the waiting would stop. I thought about all the times in my life I'd run from things, relationships, jobs, responsibilities, always running, always looking for the next place to hide. And I thought about Sarah, 7 years old, lying in the woods with her head cracked open while I ran home and pretended I'd never been there. I'd spent my whole life running. I stepped across the stones. The forest swallowed me immediately. The darkness was total, suffocating. I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything except my own ragged breathing. I stumbled forward, my hands out in front of me, feeling for trees, for anything solid. Then I heard it, the breathing. The same wet, labored breathing I'd heard that first night, but it was all around me now, coming from every direction, like the forest itself had lungs. Something brushed against my leg. I jerked away and kept moving, but it came again. Something smooth and cold, like fingers. Then something else touched my back, my arm, my face. Fingers everywhere, touching, probing, pulling at my clothes and hair. I tried to run, but they held me in place. The fingers multiplied, became dozens, then hundreds, then countless, all of them cold and smooth and wrong. They covered me like a second skin, pressing into my mouth when I tried to scream, sliding across my eyes, forcing their way into my ears. I was suffocating, drowning in hands. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they released me. I fell forward onto my hands and knees, gasping. When I looked up, I was back in the clearing, back inside the stone circle. The RV was upright again, sitting exactly where it had been. Lights on, door closed, as if nothing had happened. The faceless children were gone. I got slowly to my feet, my whole body shaking. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in ash, packed under my nails, ground into my skin. I walked to the RV door. It opened when I touched it. Inside, everything was normal. The mattress was on the cab bed where it belonged. The cups were in the cabinet. No sign that the whole thing had been overturned just minutes ago. I sat down at the dinette, my mind reeling. Had any of it happened? Was it happening now? Was I asleep, dreaming all of this? I didn't know. I couldn't tell anymore where reality ended and the nightmare began. The night passed. Or time moved forward at least. My watch started working again. The numbers ticking past 3:17 to 3:18 to 3:19. Eventually, the darkness outside began to thin. Gray light seeped into the sky. Dawn came. I sat at the dinette and watched it happen. Watched the forest emerge from shadow into detail. Individual trees, the texture of bark, the scatter of pine needles on the ground. Normal. Everything looked normal. When there was enough light, I went outside. The stone circle was gone. No trace of it remained. The clearing looked exactly as it had when I'd first arrived 3 days ago, just dirt and pine needles and my tire tracks from when I'd parked. The ash pile was gone too. I walked to where it had been, but there was nothing. Just undisturbed ground. I looked at my hands, still covered in ash. I spent that day trying to leave. I got in the RV, started the engine, put it in drive. But I couldn't make myself press the gas. Some invisible force held me there, like those times I'd tried to walk beyond the circle. My foot would not obey the command to move. After an hour of sitting behind the wheel, sweating and shaking, I gave up. I was trapped. The circle was gone, but I was still inside it somehow, still bound by whatever rules it operated under. That night, the children came back. This time I was awake when they arrived. I watched through the window as they emerged from the tree line just after sunset, one by one, their blank faces turning toward the RV. They formed their ring around me, hands linked, swaying. Then they began to sing. It wasn't a song in any language I knew, but I understood it anyway. It was a song about ash and fire, about debts paid and circles closed, about children who died alone in the dark, about me. They sang all night. I covered my ears, but I could still hear it, could feel it vibrating through the floor of the RV, through my bones, through my teeth. The song burrowed into my skull and laid eggs there, hatching into horrible understanding. I couldn't leave because I owed a life. Sarah's life. The circle had claimed her and I'd escaped. The debt was mine. The only way out was to pay. When dawn came, the children faded like mist. But they'd left something behind. In the center of where their circle had been, right outside my door, was a pile of dry wood, kindling, logs, everything needed for a fire, and beside it, a book of matches. I stared at it from the window for a long time. The sun rose higher. The day warmed. Normal. Everything was normal except for the wood and matches sitting there like an invitation, like a demand. I knew what they wanted, what the circle wanted, what Sarah's ghost wanted, if that's what the ash thing had been. They wanted me to burn. Not literally, or maybe literally, I couldn't tell anymore, but they wanted me to stop running, to face what I'd done, to kneel in the ashes and remember and be marked by it, to let the guilt consume me the way it should have 27 years ago. That night, I built the fire. I don't remember deciding to do it. I was inside the RV one moment, and the next, I was outside, kneeling beside the pile of wood, striking matches. The kindling caught easily. The flames spread. I fed the fire until it blazed hot enough to feel from 6 feet away. Then I sat beside it, like I'd seen the faceless child do, and waited. They came as the fire burned down to coals, all of them emerging from the darkness, forming their circle around me. But this time, they didn't stop at the edge. They walked right into the circle, right up to the fire. The smallest one knelt across from me. When it tilted its head, I saw a crack in its smooth face, a seam appearing where its mouth should be. The seam widened, split, opened into a black void. Sarah's voice came out of the void. "You killed me." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough." "I know. You have to burn." I looked at the fire. The coals glowed red and orange, pulsing like a heartbeat. Heat radiated from them in waves. "Okay," I heard myself say. I reached toward the coals. The heat was incredible, searing. I could feel my skin starting to blister before I even touched them. But I kept reaching, kept moving my hand closer. The faceless child, Sarah, watched. My fingers were inches from the coals now. The pain was blinding. I could smell my own hair starting to singe. Then Sarah spoke again. "Stop." I froze. "You would do it," she said. "You would burn yourself. I can see that now." I said nothing. My hand was still extended over the coals, shaking with the effort of holding it there. "The circle wanted to see if you would run again," Sarah said. "That's all it ever wanted to know. Would you run, or would you stay and face it?" Slowly, I pulled my hand back. The relief from the heat was immediate and overwhelming. I cradled my burned hand against my chest, feeling tears running down my face. "I'm sorry," I said again. "I'm so sorry. I was scared. I was just a kid, and I was scared." "I was scared too," Sarah said. "I was scared when I fell. I was scared when you didn't come back. I was scared when I died alone." "I know, but I'm not scared anymore. I don't need to be." The seam in her face closed. Her blank features smoothed over again. She stood up, and the other faceless children stood with her. "You can go," Sarah said. "The debt is paid." "But I didn't." "You would have. That's enough. The circle has what it needs." They turned away then, all of them, and walked back into the forest. I watched them go, their small forms disappearing into the shadows between the trees, until I was alone beside the dying fire. I sat there until morning. When the sun rose, I finally stood and went back to the RV. I washed my hands, no ash this time, just the blisters from nearly touching the coals. I packed my things. I got in the driver's seat. This time, when I pressed the gas pedal, the RV moved. I drove out of the Shoshone National Forest, back down the Chief Joseph Scenic Highway, back toward civilization. I drove for hours, putting miles between me and that clearing, that circle, those children, but I carried them with me. I still do. Every night when I go to sleep, I wake up with ash on my hands. Not real ash. When I turn on the light, my hands are clean. But I can feel it there, can taste it on my tongue. The circle let me go, but it marked me first. Marked me so I would never forget again. So I would carry Sarah with me everywhere I go, a ghost made of guilt and ash. I still go camping sometimes. I can't seem to stop, even though every trip brings the same nightmare. I park my RV in clearings and wait for night. Wait to wake up standing in the forest with ash on my hands and the taste of burning in my mouth. I've learned to live with it. You'd be surprised what you can learn to live with. But I never go back to Wyoming. And I never, ever camp in a clearing that has stones arranged in a circle. Because some debts may be paid, but they're never really gone. They just change form. They become the ash you carry under your nails, the stain you can't wash off, the ghost that sits beside you at every fire. The circle let me go, but I never really left. I'm still there, kneeling in the ashes, remembering what I did. I'll always be there. Even when I'm somewhere else, I'm there. That's what quiet costs, I've learned. That's what you buy when you run to the woods to escape yourself. You find out you can't escape. You find out the woods have been waiting for you, patient and hungry, ready to make you remember everything you've tried to forget. And once you remember, once you really remember, you carry it forever. Like ash, like fire, like a child's ghost with no face, standing at the edge of your vision, reminding you that some things can never be outrun. My name is Hazel. I'm 34 years old. I woke at the Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming with ash on my hands, and I wake that way every morning still. Story 4. I'm Elijah, I'm 34 years old, and I followed fireflies into the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in northern Minnesota, and they spelled my name. I should have known better. That's what I keep telling myself now, in the sterile hospital room where the nurses won't meet my eyes and the doctors speak in hushed tones about trauma and shock. But how could I have known? How could anyone predict that something as innocent as chasing light through the trees would unravel everything I thought I understood about the world? It started 3 weeks ago when my sister Kara called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken much since our father's funeral 2 years prior. One of those family fractures that happen slowly, then all at once. She said she needed to get away, that the city was suffocating her, that she'd rented an RV and wanted to drive up to the Boundary Waters for a week of camping and reconnection. She asked if I'd come with her and her boyfriend, Marcus. I almost said no. My life in Chicago was comfortable, predictable. I had my routine at the architecture firm, my Thursday trivia nights, my weekend runs along the lakefront. But something in Kara's voice made me pause. She sounded brittle, like she might shatter if I refused. So I said yes, packed a duffel bag with clothes I hadn't worn since college, and met them at a rental lot on a humid Friday afternoon in late August. The RV was a 32-foot Winnebago that smelled like artificial pine and someone else's vacation. Marcus drove while Kara rode shotgun, leaving me in the back dinette area with my phone and a paperback I'd grabbed from a gas station. Marcus was fine. A software developer with a beard that looked meticulously unkempt and a tendency to explain things nobody asked about. He'd been dating Kara for 8 months, and I could tell he was trying too hard to impress me, to prove he was good enough for my little sister. The drive took most of the day. We stopped twice for gas and once for food at a diner where the waitress looked at us like we were already lost. The landscape gradually transformed from highway sprawl to dense forest, the trees pressing closer to the road until it felt like we were driving through a green tunnel. Kara turned in her seat to smile at me, and for a moment she looked like the kid sister I remembered, the one who used to make me build blanket forts and play elaborate games of pretend. "This is going to be good," she said. "I can feel it." I nodded, but I was watching the trees slide past the window, noticing how the shadows between them seemed darker than they should be, even in late afternoon. We arrived at the Boundary Waters entry point just before sunset. The ranger station was a small wooden building that looked like it had been there since before Minnesota was a state. An older man with weathered skin and pale eyes checked our permits and handed us a map marked with our designated campsite. "Stay on the marked trails," he said, his voice flat and rehearsed. "Don't feed the wildlife. Keep your food stored properly, and if you hear anything strange at night—" "Strange?" Marcus interrupted, laughing. "Like what, Bigfoot?" The ranger didn't smile. "Just stay in your vehicle. Don't go wandering." The drive to our campsite took another 40 minutes along increasingly rough roads. The RV bounced and swayed, and I had to grip the edge of the dinette table to keep from sliding across the vinyl seat. Finally, we pulled into a clearing surrounded by tall pines and birch trees, their white bark glowing in the dying light. "This is perfect," Kara said, already unbuckling her seatbelt. The campsite was isolated, which I suppose was the point. The nearest other campers were allegedly 2 miles away, according to the ranger's map. There was a fire pit ringed with stones, a weathered picnic table, and a narrow trail that disappeared into the woods, marked by a faded sign that read, "Lake Access, 0.3 miles." We spent the last hour of daylight setting up camp. Marcus leveled the RV and connected the water and electricity to the hookups. Kara organized the interior, humming to herself in a way that made me remember our mother, dead now for 5 years. I gathered firewood from the surrounding area, trying to ignore the way my skin prickled every time I turned my back to the forest. The woods here were different from any I'd experienced before. There was a quality to the silence, not peaceful exactly, but expectant, like the trees were holding their breath. I found myself glancing over my shoulder repeatedly, certain I was being watched, but seeing nothing except shadows and the occasional flutter of leaves. By the time full dark fell, we had a fire crackling in the pit and 3 camping chairs arranged around it. Marcus had insisted on bringing hot dogs and beer, and we roasted the former while drinking the latter, making small talk that felt forced and hollow. Kara kept touching Marcus's arm, laughing too loudly at his jokes. I recognized the performance. She was trying to show me how happy she was, how good things were. "So, what's the plan for tomorrow?" I asked, mostly to fill the silence that kept threatening to swallow our conversation. "I want to hike to the lake," Kara said. "Maybe go swimming if the water's not too cold. Then we could explore some of the other trails. The ranger said there are some really beautiful lookout points. Sounds good, I said, though something in my gut was already twisting. Around 10 o'clock, Marcus yawned theatrically and announced he was turning in. Kara kissed his cheek and told him she'd be in soon. After he'd disappeared into the RV, she moved her chair closer to mine. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. "I know things have been weird between us." "It's okay. It's not, though. After Dad died, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle you reminding me of him." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and poked at the fire with a stick. "Do you ever feel like he's still around?" she asked. "Like he's watching us?" The question made my scalp tighten. "Sometimes. I see him in dreams," she said. "He's always trying to tell me something, but I can't hear him. His mouth moves, but no sound comes out." A log shifted in the fire, sending up a shower of sparks. In the trees beyond our circle of light, something moved. I turned quickly, but saw nothing. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Kara was staring into the flames. "Hear what?" "I thought I heard something in the woods." She looked up then, her face half lit by firelight, half lost in shadow. "The ranger said we might hear things. It's just the forest. Animals and stuff?" But her hand was gripping the arm of her chair, knuckles white. We sat in silence for a few more minutes before Kara stood and stretched. "I should get some sleep. We're hiking early, right?" "Right." She paused before heading to the RV, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You'll be okay out here?" "I'm a big boy, Kara." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good night, Eli." After she'd gone inside, I sat alone by the dying fire, nursing the last of my beer. The forest sounds had changed. The earlier bird calls and rustling had given way to a deeper quiet, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or whisper of wind through leaves. I told myself it was natural, that forests were always louder in your imagination than in reality. Then I saw the first firefly. It appeared at the edge of the clearing, a small point of golden light hovering about 3 feet off the ground. I watched it pulse once, twice, then drift slowly to the left. Another appeared beside it, then another. Within seconds there were dozens of them, hundreds maybe, moving in a slow, choreographed pattern that seemed too deliberate to be natural. I stood up, mesmerized. Fireflies in late August weren't unheard of, but I'd never seen them in such numbers, never seen them move with such purpose. They formed a glowing line that extended from the clearing into the dark woods, like a path of light beckoning me forward. Then they began to arrange themselves into shapes. At first I thought I was imagining it, that the beer and the late hour were playing tricks with my perception. But no, the fireflies were definitely forming letters, bright against the darkness. An E appeared first, then an L, then an I. They were spelling my name. I should have been terrified. I should have run into the RV and locked the door and refused to come out until morning. But instead, I felt a strange pull, an almost magnetic attraction to those lights. They seemed to promise something, answers maybe, or understanding. They seemed to know me. I grabbed a flashlight from the picnic table and walked toward them. The fireflies moved as I approached, maintaining their formation but drifting deeper into the woods. The letter pattern dissolved and reformed into an arrow pointing along the trail, the same trail marked for lake access. My rational mind was screaming at me to stop, to turn back, but my feet kept moving forward. The beam of my flashlight seemed weak and ineffective compared to the glow of the insects, which now numbered in the thousands. The trail was narrow and uneven, roots snaking across the packed dirt like veins. The fireflies moved in waves ahead of me, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. Behind me, the RV and the campfire faded into darkness. I was alone with the lights and the forest was breathing. I could feel it, the rise and fall of something vast and alive, the earth itself inhaling and exhaling beneath my feet. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the stars. The air grew thick and humid, carrying scents of decay and growth, life and death intermingled. How long I walked, I couldn't say. Time felt strange, elastic. What might have been minutes could have been hours. The fireflies led me off the main trail onto a narrower path I was certain hadn't been there before. Branches caught at my clothes and hair. Something wet brushed across my face. Spider webs, I told myself, though they felt heavier than that, more substantial. Then the path opened into a small clearing, and I stopped. There was a structure in the center of the space. Calling it a building would be generous. It looked like someone had tried to construct a cabin out of found materials and then abandoned the project halfway through. Walls of mismatched wood and stone leaned at odd angles. A roof made of bark and branches sagged in the middle. The single door hung crooked on rusted hinges. The fireflies had massed around this structure, coating it in golden light that pulsed and shifted. They formed patterns on the walls, symbols I almost recognized, shapes that tugged at something deep in my memory. As I watched, they spelled out another word. Father. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back, then another, but my heel caught on a root and I stumbled. My flashlight flew from my hand and rolled away, its beam cutting wild arcs through the darkness before settling on something that made my blood freeze. There were bones scattered around the clearing. Not animal bones. I knew enough anatomy from my years of studying structural design to recognize human skeletal structure. A femur here, a skull there, a rib cage half buried in leaves. They looked old, weathered, but not ancient. Some still had scraps of fabric clinging to them. I scrambled to my feet, forgetting the flashlight, forgetting everything except the need to get away from this place. But when I turned to run back the way I'd come, the path was gone. Where there had been a clear trail, now there was only dense forest, trees pressed so close together I couldn't see between them. The fireflies began to move again, swirling around me in a tornado of light. They were no longer beautiful. There was something aggressive about their movement now, something hungry. They landed on my arms, my neck, my face, and where they touched, my skin burned. I swatted at them wildly, running in the only direction that seemed possible, toward the decrepit structure. Maybe there was another way out on the far side. Maybe I could find shelter until morning. Maybe. The door opened under my weight and I tumbled inside. The smell hit me first. Rot and mold, and something else. Something sweet and chemical that reminded me of the funeral home where we'd held my father's wake. The interior was larger than it should have been based on the external dimensions, a physical impossibility that my architect's brain couldn't process. The walls were covered in more symbols, carved deep into the wood and painted with something dark and rust-colored. In the center of the room was a chair, old, ornate, completely out of place in this ramshackle structure, and in the chair sat a man. No, not a man. Something that had been a man, maybe, a long time ago. His skin was gray and mottled, stretched too tight over bones that bent at wrong angles. His eyes were the worst part. Completely black, no whites, no iris, just depthless darkness that seemed to pull at my sanity. He was naked except for strings of what looked like teeth around his neck. Human teeth. He smiled at me, revealing rows of sharp yellowed points where regular teeth should have been. "Elijah," he said, and his voice was the sound of insects buzzing, wood rotting, things dying in the dark. "We've been waiting for you." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was frozen, trapped in that gaze, drowning in those black eyes. "Your father spoke of you," the thing continued, "before he died. In his final moments, when the fear took him and he saw us truly, he called your name. He begged us to spare you." "My father died in a hospital," I heard myself say. "Heart attack." The creature's smile widened. "Is that what they told you?" How comforting lies can be. He stood, and his movements were wrong. Joints bending in impossible directions, limbs extending longer than they should. He crossed the space between us in two fluid strides that made my stomach churn. "He came to us," the creature said, "seeking power, seeking knowledge. The Boundary Waters have been a place of power for millennia, long before your people gave them that name. The native tribes knew. They stayed away from certain places, performed rituals to appease certain hungers. But your father thought he was smarter. He thought he could bargain with forces beyond his comprehension. You're lying. But my voice shook because I was remembering things. My father's increasingly erratic behavior in the months before his death, the strange books he'd been reading, the way he'd started talking about ancient things and forgotten names. He promised us something, the creature said, reaching out to touch my face with fingers that felt like ice and ash. A blood debt. His firstborn son. The world tilted. I stumbled backward, finally breaking free from whatever had held me frozen. No, I said. No, that's insane. That's... Yet here you are. The creature gestured around the room, drawn by lights that spelled your name, led down paths that only open for those marked. Your sister, she has some sensitivity, some small awareness of what lurks in the spaces between. She felt the pull. She brought you here, even if she doesn't understand why. Kara. Oh God, Kara and Marcus were alone in that RV. I ran. Behind me, the creature laughed, and the sound followed me out the door, through the clearing into the woods. The fireflies rose in a cloud, but I crashed through them, ignoring the burns, ignoring everything except the desperate need to get back to the campsite. The forest had changed. Trees I didn't remember twisted overhead. The ground sloped in wrong directions. I ran for what felt like hours, my lungs screaming, my legs burning, branches tearing at my skin and clothes. Several times I fell, my hands plunging into soil that was wet and warm, like flesh. Once, I could have sworn I felt a heartbeat through the earth. Finally, I saw light ahead, the glow of our campfire. I burst into the clearing, gasping, bleeding from a dozen scratches, my clothes torn and filthy. The RV was dark and silent. "Kara!" I screamed, running to the door. "Marcus!" I pounded on the metal frame, then tried the handle, locked from inside. I grabbed a rock from the fire pit and slammed it against the window. "Kara, open the door. We have to leave. We have to—" The door opened. Kara stood there in her pajamas, looking sleepy and confused. Behind her, Marcus emerged from the bedroom area, rubbing his eyes. "Eli! What the hell? It's 3 a.m. I stared at them, trying to reconcile what I'd experienced with their obvious normalcy. "We have to leave," I said. "Right now. Something's wrong with this place. Something's in the woods. I saw. Jesus, Eli, you're bleeding." Kara reached for me, but I flinched back. "What happened? Did you fall? Didn't you hear me screaming? Didn't you hear anything?" They exchanged glances, and in that look I saw something that made my stomach drop. Concern. Worry. The kind of look you give someone who's having a breakdown. "We didn't hear anything," Marcus said carefully. "We've been asleep. Maybe you had a nightmare? Sometimes in unfamiliar places." "It wasn't a nightmare," I was shouting now, aware that I sounded unhinged but unable to stop. "The fireflies spelled my name. There's a creature in the woods. It said my father made a deal. It said, 'Eli.'" Kara's voice was soft, pitying. "Dad's been dead for 2 years. You're not over it yet. I get that. But this isn't. I'm not crazy." "I didn't say you were crazy. I said maybe you need to calm down and we need to leave. Now. Tonight." Marcus stepped forward, placing himself slightly between me and Kara. A protective gesture that enraged me even as I understood it. "Look, man, I get that you're upset, but we're not packing up and driving through the woods in the middle of the night because you had a bad dream. In the morning, if you still want to go, fine. But right now, you need to calm down." I wanted to hit him. I wanted to grab them both and drag them to the truck and force them to drive until we were far away from the boundary waters and whatever ancient thing lived in its shadows. But I could see in their faces that they wouldn't believe me. How could they? I barely believed it myself. "At least lock the doors," I said finally, defeated. "Please, lock everything." "Okay," Kara said. "Okay, we'll lock everything, and you should come inside. You shouldn't be out there alone." But I shook my head. I didn't know who or what might be inside the RV with them, if that thing could take other forms, if there were more of them. At least outside I could run if I needed to. "I'll stay by the fire," I said. "Keep watch." They tried to argue, but I was adamant. Finally, they retreated into the RV, and I heard the locks click into place. I rebuilt the fire, making it as large as I dared, then sat with my back against the picnic table, a heavy branch across my lap, watching the tree line. The fireflies were back. They hovered at the edge of the clearing, pulsing their golden light in patterns that hurt to look at. I forced myself not to watch them directly, keeping them in my peripheral vision while scanning the darkness for other threats. Hours crawled past. The fire burned low despite my efforts to feed it. The sky remained stubbornly dark, no hint of approaching dawn, though my watch claimed it was nearly 5 a.m. I should have been exhausted, but adrenaline kept me wired and alert, every nerve-ending screaming danger. Then I heard Kara scream. I was on my feet and at the RV door in seconds, pounding on the metal. "Kara! Kara, open up!" The scream cut off abruptly. Silence. Then Marcus's voice muffled through the door. "She's fine. She just had a nightmare. Go away, Eli." But I'd heard the terror in that scream. I knew the difference between a nightmare cry and genuine horror. I ran around to the side of the RV where the bedroom window was located. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap, and through it I could see movement inside. Shapes. Too many shapes. Marcus and Kara should have been the only people in there, but I counted at least 4 silhouettes. The window shattered as I smashed it with my branch. Glass rained down, and I was pulling myself through the opening before conscious thought could intervene. I fell into the bedroom, landing hard on the fold-out bed, and saw... Marcus wasn't Marcus anymore. His eyes were black pits, just like the creature from the woods. His mouth had opened too wide, jaw dislocating to reveal rows of teeth that went down his throat. He was holding Kara against the wall, one hand around her throat while the other hand... His other hand was inside her chest. Not through her clothes, through her actual flesh. I could see his fingers disappearing into her sternum, could see her skin bulging around the intrusion. And Kara was changing too. As I watched in frozen horror, her skin began to gray, her eyes starting to darken at the edges. Whatever Marcus was doing, whatever he was putting inside her, was transforming her into one of them. I swung the branch with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with Marcus's head with a wet crack, and he staggered sideways, his hand pulling free from Kara's chest. There was no blood, just a strange, dark residue that seemed to writhe with independent life. Kara collapsed, gasping. Marcus turned to face me, and his neck rotated a full 180 degrees while his body remained stationary. That smile again, those too many teeth. "The blood debt must be paid," he said in that buzzing, rotting voice. "The father promised the son. The son brings the sister. The circle completes." I grabbed Kara under her arms and dragged her toward the broken window. She was conscious but weak, her breathing shallow and rapid. The dark residue on her chest was spreading, creeping up toward her throat like living shadow. "Move!" I shouted at her. "Kara, you have to move." She managed to get her feet under her, and together we scrambled through the window. I felt Marcus's hand grab my ankle, those fingers cold as death, and I kicked backward with my free foot. My heel connected with something soft, and the grip loosened just enough for me to pull free. We tumbled out of the RV and ran. The clearing was filled with fireflies now. Thousands, millions maybe, so many that their combined light was nearly as bright as daylight. They formed shapes in the air. Faces, reaching hands, symbols that seared themselves into my vision. "The truck," Kara gasped. "Keys are in my pocket." But when we reached Marcus's pickup truck, all 4 tires were flat, shredded as if by massive claws, and standing between us and the access road was the gray creature from the cabin, flanked by others like it. I counted 6, then 10, then stopped counting because they kept emerging from the forest, naked and twisted and hungry. "Behind the RV," I said, and we ran again. We huddled in the narrow space between the RV and the trees, my arm around Kara, her body trembling against mine. The dark residue had reached her collarbone, tendrils of shadow crawling up her neck like invasive vines. "Eli," she whispered. I can feel it inside me. It's whispering. It knows things. It knows, oh God, it knows everything about me. All my secrets, all my fears. It's eating them. Fight it, I said, though I had no idea if that was possible. Don't let it in. She laughed, a broken sound. I let it in when I asked you to come here. That was my choice. Marcus has been one of them for weeks. Since before I met him. He was sent to me. To get to you. To bring you here. Kara, Dad really did make a deal. I remember now. I was there. I was 12. And I was sick. Do you remember? That summer when I had pneumonia so bad they thought I might die? Dad took me into the woods one night. He said he knew people who could help. But they weren't people. They were these things. And he promised them his firstborn. He promised them you. The creatures were circling the RV now, their footsteps silent on the forest floor. I could hear them breathing. Wet, raspy sounds like lungs filled with fluid. Why? I asked. Why would he do that? Because he loved me more. She said it simply, factually. He chose me over you, and I got better, and you never knew. The betrayal was a physical pain in my chest. My father, who'd taught me to ride a bike and taken me to baseball games and told me he was proud of me, had sold me to monsters to save my sister. What do they want? I asked. What happens if they get me? Kara's eyes were almost entirely black now. When she spoke, her voice had that same buzzing quality I'd heard from the others. They want your meat, she said, your bones for their collection, your skin for their walls, your teeth for their necklaces. But mostly, they want your fear, your terror. It's the only thing that still tastes sweet to them after all these centuries. They've been waiting so long, Eli, so patient. And now you're here, and you're afraid, and you taste so good. She lunged at me. I'd been watching the creatures in front of us, not paying attention to the threat beside me. Her hands caught my throat, and her strength was inhuman. I was slammed backward into the RV's metal siding, stars exploding across my vision. Those black eyes stared into mine, and I could see things moving in them, writhing shapes that might have been worms, or might have been something worse. I'm sorry, my sister said with someone else's voice. I'm still in here somewhere, and I'm so sorry, but I can't stop this. It's taking everything. Her face contorted in agony, and for just a moment her eyes cleared. Brown again. Kara again. Run, she gasped. There's a trail. East side, marked with red. It's the only way out. Run, Eli. Run, and don't— Then the darkness took her again, and she was lifting me off my feet, my legs kicking uselessly, my vision starting to fade as her grip cut off my air supply. I managed to get my hand to my belt and yanked free my pocket knife. A small thing I'd carried since I was a teenager, never expecting to use it for anything more serious than opening packages. I flicked it open and drove it into Kara's shoulder. She didn't bleed. Instead, that dark residue oozed out, and she hissed like a snake and dropped me. I fell to my knees, gasping, and then I was running, not toward the campsite but away from it, into the forest, in the direction Kara had indicated. Behind me, I heard howls. Deep, resonant sounds that no human throat should be able to produce. The creatures were giving chase. The forest was a nightmare of grasping branches and hidden roots. I fell twice, slamming into the ground hard enough to drive the breath from my lungs. Each time I forced myself back up and kept running. I had no light except the moon, which had finally appeared, though it looked wrong, too large and too red, and the occasional break in the canopy overhead. I found the trail marked with red. It was barely visible, more of a suggestion than a path, but it was there. I followed it because I had no other options, my sister's final clear-eyed words driving me forward. The howls were getting closer. I could hear them crashing through the underbrush, moving faster than should be possible. They were hurting me, I realized, pushing me in a specific direction, but I couldn't stop running, couldn't stop moving. The trail led downhill, and I nearly tumbled headfirst as my feet skidded on loose soil. I caught myself on a tree trunk, the bark rough against my palms, and that's when I saw it. A road, an actual paved road, cutting through the forest like a miracle. I scrambled down the last few yards of hillside and hit the asphalt running. Left or right? I chose right for no reason except that it was slightly downhill. My legs were screaming, my lungs burning, but I kept running because the howls were right behind me now, so close I could hear the click of teeth snapping at the air. Headlights appeared around a curve. A vehicle, an old pickup truck that looked like it had been through several wars and lost all of them. I ran into the middle of the road, waving my arms, screaming for help. The truck screeched to a stop. A man leaned out, 70s maybe, with wild white hair and a face lined with more years than his age should have earned him. "Get in," he shouted. "Now!" I didn't argue. I threw myself into the passenger seat, and before I'd even closed the door, he was accelerating. Tires squealing. In the side mirror, I saw them emerge onto the road behind us. A dozen gray, twisted forms running on all fours, their mouths open and screaming. "Don't look back," the old man said. "Never look back when you're leaving their territory. It gives them permission." We drove in silence for several minutes, the creatures gradually falling behind until they disappeared entirely. Only then did I allow myself to breathe properly. "Thank you," I managed. "Thank you, Save it," he said. "I know what you saw. I know what you're feeling. Disbelief. Terror. The urge to rationalize it all away. Don't. What you experienced was real. The things in those woods are real. They've been there longer than any of us can imagine. My sister, she's back there. She's gone," he said flatly. "Whatever was your sister is gone now. I'm sorry, but there's no getting her back. Once they're inside you, once they've taken root, there's no cure, no exorcism, no hope." I wanted to argue, to insist that there had to be something we could do, but I'd seen Kara's eyes. I'd heard that voice coming from her throat. He was right. "How did you know?" I asked. "How did you know to be there?" "I didn't," he said. "I patrol these roads. Have for 30 years ever since—" He paused, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Ever since they took my wife and daughter. I couldn't save them. But maybe I can save others. Sometimes I'm in time, sometimes I'm not." He drove me to a hospital in Grand Marais, told them I'd been in a car accident in the woods, and left before I could get his name. The doctors treated my cuts and bruises, gave me something for the shock, and asked questions I couldn't answer. The police came, asking about my sister and Marcus, about the abandoned RV they'd found with shredded tires and blood inside. I told them I didn't remember. Trauma, the doctors explained. The mind protecting itself. The police didn't push too hard. Hikers went missing in the Boundary Waters regularly. Most were never found. I was lucky, they said. Lucky. That was 3 weeks ago. They're releasing me tomorrow. I have nowhere to go. Can't go back to Chicago, to my apartment full of memories of a family that was broken before I even knew it. Can't face the questions, the condolences, the false comfort. But that's not why I'm writing this. I'm writing this because of what I saw last night, when the nurse forgot to close the curtain completely. Fireflies, hovering outside my third-story window, spelling my name. They found me. Of course they found me. The blood debt wasn't paid. My father's promise wasn't fulfilled. And these things, whatever they are, whatever ancient hungers drive them, are patient. They've waited centuries. They can wait as long as it takes. I see them in shadows now, in the corner of my eye, in reflections that don't quite match. I hear that buzzing voice in the static of the television, in the hum of fluorescent lights, in the whisper of wind through the trees outside. And sometimes, late at night when the medication starts to wear off, I smell it, rot and mold and that sweet chemical smell of death. Getting closer. They're coming for what they're owed. I'm writing this so someone will know. So when I disappear, and I will disappear, I can feel it coming like a storm on the horizon. Someone will understand. Don't go to the Boundary Waters. Don't follow lights that spell your name. Don't trust the forest, no matter how beautiful it seems. And if someone you love makes a deal with something in the dark, run. Run far and fast and don't ever look back. The fireflies are at my window again. More of them this time. They're forming words. Come home. Come home. Come home. The door to my room just opened, but no one walked in. Nothing walked in, just that smell, growing stronger and the temperature dropping so fast I can see my breath. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely type. The lights are flickering. The fireflies are inside now, filling the room with their golden glow. They're beautiful. God help me, they're so beautiful, and I'm so tired of running. If someone finds this, tell my sister I forgive her. Tell my father I understand. Tell the old man in the pickup truck thank you for trying, and whatever you do, don't come looking for me. I'm already gone. Story 5. I'm Lila, 34 years old. I heard my father's voice at Conecuh National Forest in southern Alabama, though he's been gone 10 years. The RV rental smelled like burnt coffee and air freshener trying too hard to cover something underneath. My husband, Derek, drove with both hands on the wheel, knuckles white the way he always did when he was pretending everything was fine. Our daughter, Maya, sat in the back with her headphones on, staring out at the pine trees, blurring past, her face reflecting in the window like a ghost of herself. "This is going to be good for us," Derek said for the third time that morning. I didn't answer. The silence between us had grown thick over the past year, ever since my father died and Derek decided I needed to move on, faster than grief apparently allowed. This trip was his idea. 3 days in Conecuh National Forest. No cell service, just family time. He'd read about it in some outdoor magazine. Quiet, he said. Peaceful. The forest swallowed us whole the moment we turned off Highway 137. The pines grew dense and dark, their canopy blocking out the late September sun until everything took on a greenish underwater quality. Spanish moss hung from branches like torn funeral veils. The GPS lost signal within minutes, but Derek had printed directions to a primitive campsite he'd found on some obscure forum. Site 47, deep in the forest, accessible only by a maintenance road that hadn't been maintained in what looked like decades. The RV bounced and scraped along the rutted path. Maya pulled off her headphones. "Dad, are you sure we're supposed to be here?" "Adventure," Derek said, but his voice cracked on the second syllable. The campsite appeared suddenly, a clearing barely large enough for the RV, surrounded by pines so tall they seemed to lean inward, watching. A fire ring made of blackened stones sat in the center, filled with old ash that looked greasy somehow. There was a picnic table missing half its planks and a rusted metal post that might have once held a sign. "Perfect," Derek announced, killing the engine. The silence that rushed in was absolute. No birds, no insects, just the ticking of the cooling engine and the whisper of wind through pine needles that sounded uncomfortably like breathing. We spent the afternoon setting up. Derek leveled the RV, connected the generator, checked the propane. Maya and I gathered firewood from the edge of the clearing, though neither of us ventured far into the trees. There was something about the way the shadows pooled between the trunks, thick and liquid. "Mom," Maya said quietly, "do you smell that?" I did. Underneath the pine sap and earth, there was something else, something sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. "Probably a dead animal," I said, not believing it. That night we cooked hot dogs over the fire. The flames burned strangely, more blue than orange, and they cast shadows that moved independently of the people making them. Derek tried to start a conversation about school, but Maya just pushed her food around her plate. I watched the tree line, where the darkness seemed to press against the light from our fire like something solid. "Your father would have loved this," Derek said to me. My chest went tight. "Don't. I'm just saying, you didn't know him well enough to say what he would have loved." Derek's jaw clenched. Maya stood abruptly. "I'm going to bed." She disappeared into the RV, and Derek and I sat in the kind of silence that feels like a third person at the table. After a while, he went inside too. I stayed by the fire, watching it burn blue, listening to the forest breathe. That's when I heard it. Lila. My name, carried on the wind, in a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years. My father's voice. I stood so fast the camp chair fell backward. My heart hammered against my ribs. The voice had come from the trees, somewhere past the firelight where the shadows merged into absolute darkness. Lila, sweetheart. It was him. The exact timbre and cadence, the slight rasp from years of smoking, the way he drew out the second syllable of my name. I took a step toward the trees. Dad? The fire popped behind me and the sound broke the spell. I turned and ran into the RV, locking the door behind me. Derek was already asleep in the bed above the cab, snoring softly. Maya's curtain was drawn across the small sleeping nook in back. I climbed into the bed beside Derek, pulled the covers to my chin, and stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. I didn't sleep. Morning came gray and oppressive. Fog had rolled in overnight, so thick I could barely see the picnic table from the RV window. Derek was already up, making coffee on the camp stove outside. I watched him through the window, moving in and out of the fog like a figure in a dream. Maya emerged from her nook, pale and hollow-eyed. "Did you hear it?" she asked. My stomach dropped. "Hear what?" "Someone calling your name, over and over, all night." I pulled her close, felt her trembling. "You were dreaming. I wasn't." She looked up at me and I saw fear in her eyes I'd never seen before. "Mom, we need to leave." "We will, after breakfast. I'll talk to your dad." But Derek had other plans. He came inside with his coffee, his face flushed with enthusiasm that felt grotesque given the gray morning. "There's a trail marker just past those trees," he said, pointing into the fog. "Old logging road, according to the map. I thought we could hike it this morning, really explore the area." "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "Come on, Lila, we drove all this way." "Maya doesn't want to." "Maya's 16. She doesn't get to decide." The old argument, the same dynamic. Derek making decisions, me trying to protect Maya, the two of them pulled in opposite directions. Before my father died, he used to mediate. He'd sit Derek down, man to man, and somehow make him see reason. Without him, we were just three people spinning apart. We went on the hike. The fog clung to us like wet cloth as we walked. Derek led, followed by Maya, then me. The logging road was barely visible, more suggestion than path, winding between pines that grew so close their branches interlocked overhead. The silence pressed against my eardrums. No birds, no insects, nothing but our footsteps on the soft ground and our breathing. After 20 minutes, Maya stopped. "I'm going back." "We just started," Derek said. "I don't care. Something's wrong here." "Maya." "Let her go," I said. "I'll walk her back." Derek's face reddened. "Fine. Both of you go. I'll explore alone since apparently I'm the only one who wants to actually do something on this trip." He stalked ahead, disappearing into the fog within seconds. Maya grabbed my hand. "We should all go back," she whispered. But Derek was already gone, and I knew from experience that once he committed to something out of spite, there was no calling him back. Maya and I turned and started retracing our steps. That's when I realized the path looked different. The trees weren't in the same positions. I was sure we'd passed a distinctive pine with a double trunk, but now I couldn't find it. The logging road seemed to curve in a direction we hadn't come from. "Mom." Maya's voice was small. "It's okay. We just need to keep going." But we didn't keep going the right way. The fog thickened. The trees seemed to multiply. We walked for what felt like an hour but could have been 10 minutes or 3 hours. Time had gone elastic, stretching and compressing unpredictably. My watch had stopped at 9:47, though I was certain it had been working when we left. Then Maya screamed. I spun around. She was staring at something on the ground. At first, I thought it was a pile of leaves, but then I saw the shape. A deer, or what had been a deer. It lay on its side, legs bent at wrong angles, ribcage exposed but completely clean of organs. The cavity was hollow, scooped out, the edges of the ribs precise like they'd been cut with surgical tools. But the head was the worst part. The head was positioned facing backward, attached to the body in reverse, so the deer's dead eyes stared at its own spine. "Don't look," I said, pulling Maya away. We ran. The forest blurred around us, branches whipped at our faces. The fog seemed to chase us, rolling through the trees like something alive and hunting. I held Maya's hand so tight I was probably hurting her, but I couldn't let go, Couldn't risk losing her in this gray nightmare. We burst into the clearing. The RV sat exactly where we'd left it. The fire ring. The broken picnic table. Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost collapsed. "Derek!" I shouted. No answer. "Derek!" The RV door was ajar. I climbed the steps, Maya right behind me. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it. Coffee cups on the counter, Derek's jacket on the chair, Maya's phone charging by her bunk. But Derek wasn't there. "He probably just went to use the bathroom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a bathroom in here, Mom." We searched the clearing, calling his name. The fog was lifting slightly, and I could see further into the trees. No sign of him. I checked the time. My watch was still stopped, and then looked at the camp stove. The coffee in the pot was cold, stone cold, like it had been sitting for hours. "We need to go," Maya said. "We need to drive out of here right now." She was right. Whatever was happening in this forest, we needed to leave. I'd file a missing person report, send rangers to find Derek, but we needed to get Maya to safety. I climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key. Nothing. I tried again. The engine didn't even turn over, didn't make a sound. I checked the battery connection, the fuel gauge, everything I could think of. The RV was completely dead. "Mom?" Maya's voice was strange. I turned. She was standing at the window staring out at the trees. "What is it?" "There's someone out there." I looked. At first I saw nothing but trees and thinning fog. Then the figure emerged from between two pines. A man, tall and lean, wearing clothes that looked wrong somehow. Too dark, too formal for the forest. He walked toward our clearing with an odd, stiff gait, like his knees didn't quite bend right. As he got closer, my breath caught in my throat. He looked like my father. Same build, same silver hair, same worn flannel shirt he used to wear on weekends. But something was off about the proportions, like a photograph that had been stretched slightly. The arms, too long. The face, too narrow. "Lila," he called. "Sweetheart, I've been looking for you." Maya grabbed my arm. "Mom, that's not—" "I know." But hearing my father's voice coming from that thing made my knees weak. It stood at the edge of the clearing now, not quite stepping into the open space, staying just inside the tree line. "You should come out here," it said with my father's voice. "We need to talk." "Go away," I shouted, my voice breaking. "Is that any way to greet your old man?" The thing tilted its head, and in the motion, I saw how wrong it was. The head moved too far, almost 90 degrees like an owl. 10 years, Lila. 10 years and you never even visited my grave." Guilt stabbed through me, sharp and vicious. I had visited his grave, dozens of times, but the thing's words burrowed into the soft parts of my mind anyway, finding the places where I did feel guilty. For not calling enough when he was alive, for being too busy with my own life, for all the ways I'd failed him. "Don't listen to it," Maya said. "Grandpa would never say that to you." The thing's face twisted into something that might have been a smile. "Smart girl. Your mother raised you well, but not well enough to keep you safe out here." "What do you want?" I demanded. "Just to talk. Come into the trees, Lila. Come see me." "No." The thing laughed, and it was my father's laugh exactly, the way he used to laugh at old movies, warm and genuine. Hearing it from that thing's mouth made me want to vomit. "Suit yourself," it said. "I'll wait." It turned and walked back into the trees with that strange, stiff gait. Within seconds, the fog swallowed it completely. Maya and I locked ourselves in the RV. We pushed the dinette table against the door, though I wasn't sure what good that would do. The afternoon dragged by in silence, broken only by our breathing. I tried the RV engine every half hour. Dead every time. I tried to figure out how to disconnect the hitch, thinking maybe we could run, but the coupling was rusted shut and I didn't have the right tools. As the sun began to set, at least the sky began to darken, though I never actually saw the sun through the canopy, Maya spoke. "Dad's not coming back, is he?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to promise everything would be okay, but sitting in that dying light, in that RV that had become our coffin, I couldn't. "I don't know, honey. That thing. What is it?" I thought about the deer with its reversed head. I thought about my father's voice calling from the trees. I thought about local legends I'd heard growing up in Alabama, stories whispered at sleepovers, dismissed as superstition, stories about things in the deep woods that could steal voices, that could wear faces like masks. Something old, I said. Something that was here long before the campsite or the logging roads. How do we kill it? I don't know if we can. Night fell completely. We didn't light the fire. We sat in darkness, listening. The forest came alive with sounds. Whispers that might have been wind, footsteps that might have been falling pine cones, breathing that might have been our own fear echoing back at us. Then Derek's voice right outside the RV. "Lila! Maya! Can you let me in?" Maya started to stand, but I grabbed her arm. "Dad?" she called. "Where were you?" "Got turned around in the fog, lost the trail, but I'm okay now. Please, I'm freezing out here." The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every tone, exactly Derek. But I remembered the thing wearing my father's voice, and I thought about how Derek had disappeared into the fog, and I knew. "What's Maya's middle name?" I called. Silence. Then, "What kind of question is that?" "Answer it." "Rose. It's Rose. Now open the goddamn door." He was right. Maya Rose, named after Derek's grandmother. I looked at Maya, saw my own uncertainty reflected in her face. "Please," Derek's voice said, and now there was a note of desperation. "Lila, something's wrong with me. I feel strange. I need help." "What year did we get married?" I asked. 2008, June 14th. The reception was at the Marriott. Your father gave a speech and made everyone cry. Now let me in before I break this door down. Everything was correct, every detail. I stood and moved toward the door. "Mom, don't." Maya's voice was sharp with terror. "It knows everything," I said. "Everything about us. Then test it with something it couldn't know." I stopped, hand on the door handle. "Derek, what did I tell you last night that I've never told anyone else?" Longer silence this time. Then, "You didn't tell me anything last night. We barely spoke. You were too busy being angry at me." My hand dropped from the door. "I told you I was pregnant." The thing outside made a sound I'd never heard before. Something between a hiss and a scream that didn't sound remotely human. It slammed against the RV hard enough to rock the whole vehicle. Maya screamed. The thing hit again and again, each impact sending shudders through the frame. Then, suddenly, silence. We waited, barely breathing. Minutes passed. An hour. The silence stretched like taffy, thin and terrible. "Is it gone?" Maya whispered. "I don't know." I peered through the window. The clearing was empty, lit only by starlight filtering through the canopy. No movement in the trees. No sign of anything. But the RV was surrounded by footprints. They circled the vehicle in a perfect ring, pressed into the dirt. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all different sizes and shapes. Human prints. Animal prints. Prints that looked like neither. And between them, drag marks, like something had been pulled in circles around and around the RV. "We can't stay here," I said. "We can't go out there. We die here, Maya. Slowly. We have food for maybe 2 days, water for 3 if we're careful. That thing can wait longer than we can." "Then what do we do?" I thought about my father. Not the thing wearing his face, but the real man. He'd been a hunter, had taught me to track and move through woods, had shown me how to read the forest. He told me stories about the old places in Alabama, the places where the Creek and Choctaw had left warnings carved in trees, places people avoided without knowing why. "We find help," I said. "There has to be a ranger station, another campsite, something. The forest can't go on forever." "Yes, it can," Maya said, but she was already putting on her shoes. We waited until what I guessed was around midnight, though my watch still read 9:47. We packed water bottles, flashlights, a knife from the kitchen. I wrote a note for Derek, just in case it really had been him, and left it on the table. Opening the door felt like diving into dark water. The night air was cold and smelled like that same sweet rot from the first evening. I held Maya's hand, and we ran. We didn't follow the logging road. I had a feeling it would only lead us in circles. Instead, I picked a direction at random. South, I hoped, toward the highway, and we pushed into the trees. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness like knives. They revealed pine trunks, hanging moss, the occasional glint of animal eyes that disappeared too quickly to identify. We moved as fast as we dared, trying to be quiet but needing to cover distance. After what might have been 20 minutes, Maya stopped. "Listen." I heard it then, singing. A woman's voice, young and clear, singing something old and wordless. The melody wound through the trees, beautiful and wrong, pulling at something deep in my chest. "We need to go the other way," Maya said, but I was already walking toward it. I couldn't help myself. The song wrapped around my brain like silk, and my feet moved on their own. Behind me, Maya called my name, but her voice sounded distant and unimportant compared to the singing. The voice led me off our path, deeper into the trees, to a place where the pines gave way to a small clearing. In the center stood a woman in a white dress that gleamed in the starlight. She had long dark hair and pale skin, and she sang with her head tilted back, eyes closed. She looked like me, not similar, identical. My face, my hair, my body. She could have been my reflection stepped out of a mirror. She sang my favorite song, the lullaby my father used to sing to me when I was small, in my father's voice coming from my mouth. "Mom!" Maya's voice, sharp with panic, somewhere behind me. The singing stopped. The woman's eyes opened. They were completely black, no whites, just endless darkness. She smiled with my smile. "Hello, Lila." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The woman walked toward me with fluid grace, and I could only stand there, frozen. She reached out one hand and touched my face with fingers that were too cold to be human. "I've been waiting for you," she said in my voice. 10 years I've been practicing, learning your mannerisms, your speech patterns, listening to you cry yourself to sleep after your father died, watching you pretend to be okay for your daughter. I know you, Lila, better than you know yourself. What are you? Old, hungry, lonely. She tilted her head, and I heard vertebrae crack. This forest is mine. Has been for longer than your people have had words, and everyone who comes here belongs to me eventually. Where's my husband? Which one? She laughed, and it was my laugh. The original. I sent him running 3 hours ago. He made it almost to the road before his heart gave out. Fear does that. Or did you mean the one I made? That one's back at your campsite, waiting. He'll wait forever if I tell him to. Patient and perfect and wrong. Let us go. I can't do that. You heard your father's voice. You answered. That's the rule. Once you answer, you're mine. She looked past me, and her black eyes brightened with something like hunger. But the girl didn't answer, did she? She's free. She could walk right out of here. I felt Maya behind me, her presence like heat. "Run," I said. "Maya, run. I'm not leaving you. You have to. Please." The thing wearing my face smiled. Touching, but pointless. She can't find her way out. The forest doesn't let go easily. She'll wander until she dies or until she answers me. Either way, I win. Something inside me snapped. 10 years of grief, 10 years of trying to hold my family together, 10 years of pretending I was okay, all of it crystallized into pure rage. I lunged at the thing. My hands went around its throat, my throat, and I squeezed. It didn't try to fight back. It just smiled and spoke with my voice, calm and measured. "That's not how this works, Lila." The flesh under my hands felt wrong, too soft, like rotten fruit. My fingers sank in, and instead of blood or tissue, there was something else. Something that moved and whispered and felt like cold electricity. I yanked my hands back. The thing's smile never wavered. "You can't hurt me, but I can hurt you." It reached out faster than I could track, and its hand plunged into my chest. Not through my shirt, not breaking skin. The hand just went inside me like I was made of water. Cold flooded my body. I felt it searching, rummaging through my insides, not for organs but for something else. Memories, identity, self. "Mom!" Maya's scream was distant. The thing leaned close, its black eyes inches from mine. "I'm going to take everything you are and wear it like a coat. Your daughter won't even know the difference. I'll drive her home, tuck her into bed, kiss her good night with your lips. And slowly, over months, over years, I'll drain her dry. She'll never understand why her mother suddenly makes her so tired, so sad. She'll waste away, and everyone will blame depression or illness, never knowing that her mother died in the woods and something else came home." Its hand twisted inside my chest. Pain, like nothing I'd ever felt, radiated through my body. I saw my life spreading out before me. Memories becoming visible, tangible, being sorted through and selected by this thing. My wedding, Maya's birth, my father's funeral. It was taking them, copying them, learning how to be me. "No," I gasped. "Yes." Then Maya's voice, clear and strong. "Grandmother." The thing paused, its hand still inside my chest. It turned its head, my head, toward Maya. Maya stood at the edge of the clearing, holding something. My father's hunting knife, the one I'd inherited and brought on this trip without really knowing why. "My grandmother's name was Rose," Maya said. "The original Rose. My middle name isn't Rose, it's Lynn. Lynn after my other grandmother, the one who died before I was born." The thing hissed, and its grip inside me loosened. "Dad got the question wrong," Maya continued. "When you pretended to be him, you gave the right answer to the wrong question, and that means you didn't take him. He's still out there." "Clever girl," the thing said, withdrawing its hand from my chest. I collapsed, gasping. "But wrong. I did take him. The copy just isn't as good as I'd like. I'll have to practice more." "Then how did I know what he'd say?" Maya asked. The thing went still. I realized what Maya was doing, creating doubt, making it question itself, buying time. But time for what? Maya raised the knife to her own throat. "Let my mom go, or I cut. And if I die here, you get nothing. No answers, no voice to learn, just a corpse." "Maya, no." I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't support me. The thing laughed. "You won't do it. I can see inside you both. You're not capable of that kind of sacrifice." "Try me," Maya said, and pressed the blade against her skin hard enough to draw blood. For a long moment, nothing moved. The forest held its breath. Then the thing nodded. "Fine. Take her. Take your mother and run, but you'll never make it out. The forest is mine, and it doesn't forget. You'll die here, eventually, both of you, and I'll be waiting." It stepped back, releasing me fully. The cold drained from my body, leaving me shaking and weak. Maya ran to me, helped me up, the knife still in her hand. "Which way out?" I asked the thing. "Figure it out yourself." We ran. Behind us I heard laughter, my laughter, echoing through the trees. We ran until our lungs burned, until our legs gave out, until we couldn't run anymore. Then we walked, supporting each other, following what I hoped was south. The forest fought us. Roots grabbed at our ankles, branches whipped at our faces. The ground seemed to tilt and shift under our feet. Twice we found ourselves back in the same clearing, walking in circles despite trying to move in a straight line. The trees whispered with stolen voices. My father, Derek, even Maya's childhood self calling to us from the darkness. But we didn't answer. We kept moving. Dawn came gray and hesitant. The trees began to thin. We saw a break in the canopy ahead, a lighter patch that might have been sky. We stumbled toward it, nearly crying with relief. We burst out of the forest onto Highway 137. The asphalt felt solid and real under our feet. A truck was coming, and I staggered into the road waving my arms. It screeched to a halt. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, took one look at us and radioed for help. Park rangers arrived, police, an ambulance. They wrapped us in blankets and gave us water and asked questions we couldn't really answer. They searched for Derek. They found the RV, doors open, supplies scattered, no sign of him. They found the campsite, but it wasn't Site 47. It was Site 12, near the visitor center, less than a mile from the highway. The rangers said Site 47 didn't exist. Never had. They searched for 4 days and found nothing. No body, no evidence. The official report called it a disappearance. Probable animal attack. They listed Maya and me as survivors of exposure and psychological trauma. But I know what happened. I know what lives in those trees. 3 months later, we were trying to rebuild our lives in a new apartment, far from any forest. Maya was seeing a therapist. I was taking pills to help me sleep. We never talked about that night, not really. What was there to say? Then, one evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Lila, my father's voice. Sweetheart. I dropped the phone like it burned me. Maya looked at me from across the room, saw my face, understood. It followed us, I whispered. The phone rang again, and again, and again. We don't answer anymore, but it keeps calling. Sometimes it's my father, sometimes it's Derek, sometimes it's my own voice calling from the woods, asking to come home. The forest doesn't forget. And now, late at night, when the apartment is quiet, I hear singing. A woman's voice, young and clear, singing something old and wordless. The melody winds through the walls like silk. Maya hears it too. I can see it in her eyes, the way she tilts her head sometimes, listening. She's 16, almost grown, but she still looks like the little girl I used to sing lullabies to. The same lullabies my father sang to me. Last week, I found her standing at the window in the middle of the night, staring down at the parking lot. When I asked what she was looking at, she said, "There's someone down there who looks just like you, Mom." I looked. The parking lot was empty. "There's no one there, honey." "I know," she said, but she kept staring. Yesterday, I found a map in her room. Konaku National Forest, with a route marked in red pen. Site 47 circled even though it doesn't exist. I'm writing this now because I need to document what happened. I need someone to know, in case we disappear, in case we answer. The thing is patient. It has all the time in the world. It wears my father's voice like a comfortable coat, and every time it calls it sounds a little more right, a little more real. Every time I hear it, I want to answer just a little bit more. Maya feels it too. The pull, the need. Something was left unfinished in those woods, and it's pulling us back. I think about Derek, wandering somewhere in that endless forest. I think about the thing wearing my face, waiting in the trees. I think about the rule. Once you answer, you're mine. But what if I already answered? What if some part of me never left those woods at all? What if the thing I'm fighting isn't out there, but in here? Inside my head, my heart, my voice? The phone is ringing again. I can hear my father's voice through the speaker, clear as day. "Lila, sweetheart, come home." Maya is standing beside me now, her hand reaching for the phone. "Don't," I say, but my own hand is moving too. The forest doesn't forget, and neither do I. I remember everything. The cold, the darkness, the thing's hand inside my chest, sorting through my memories. What if it didn't just look? What if it left something behind? The phone keeps ringing. Maya's fingers brush against it. So do mine. One of us is going to answer. I just don't know which one anymore.